Good afternoon. Welcome to the Joint City Council Utility Advisory Committee workshop for September 22nd, 2021. We are again under guidelines for anyone in attendance in this room to properly wear a mask, whether they have received vaccinations or not. I encourage everyone, as always, to obtain accurate information on the readily available vaccines that have been proven to be safe and effective. Items listed on the agenda may be taken out of order. Two or more agenda items for consideration may be combined, and any item on the agenda may be removed or related discussion may be delayed at any time. With that, I will call the meeting to order. I want to confirm that the posting of the agenda has been made as appropriate. Members of City Council are present with the exception of Council Member Matt Fox. And I believe we have almost everyone from the Utility Advisory Committee here.
Dan Combs is not.
Dan Combs is the only one who's
available
absent
today. All
right, thank you. And everyone is present in chambers. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll begin with our first public comment period. As stated in the agenda for this meeting, public comment may have been submitted by written comments via email. We will also provide an opportunity for anyone who wishes to call in to do that. Public comment during this initial comment period is limited to matters for action on the agenda. Each person wishing to speak during public comment periods will have up to 5 minutes. As always, please be civil and concise. Is there anyone in chambers who would like to speak during public comment? All right, we will go to the phone line then. The number to call is 702-589-9629. Again, this is our initial public comment period for the Joint Council Utility Advisory Committee workshop. The phone number is 702-589-9629. Again, this is our initial public comment period. The phone number is 702-589-9629. Madam City Clerk, were there any written comments submitted?
No comments were received.
Thank you. Hearing no one for the initial public comment period, then we will close the comment period. Move to our agenda. I think what I'd like to do, since we do have new members of City Council, if we could start with Member Nalla and have everyone just kind of give a brief background of what you've done professionally and what your goals on the committee are.
I'm Howard Anala. I worked in wastewater operations.
Will you speak in the microphone, please? Thank you.
Hello, I'm Howard Anala. I worked in wastewater operations for over 49 years. I'm not as old as I look, I guess. I don't know. I started when I was 17, so I started very young, and I learned that's what I took on as my profession. Worked as operations companies for 10 years. Worked as a consultant for over 20 years. And in my recent job, I just retired from the city of Henderson as wastewater operations manager for all of the city wastewater operations. I've lived in town here for about 14 years, and my wife has been here longer than I have. But anyway, we lived here for that long. I wanted to be on the board of the Utility Advisory Committee just to lend my expertise where needed in the water and wastewater side, and support what electrical and other utilities we have. So I have an extensive background in what type of how to put people into facilities, budget preparations, and that sort of thing. So that's been my background.
Thank you. Member Todd?
Yeah, my name is Greg Todd, and I'm a retired LA Water and Power employee, high voltage electrician, and extra high voltage supervisor. So my job was AC and DC power systems coming into Los Angeles, and I was specifically stationed out of town. So that was my background with water and power. I also built pumping plants for them, sewage treatment plants, and general roundabout electrical. And I retired 6 years ago, and I've been on the committee now. This is going on my second term.
Thank you. Member Reel?
Hello, my name is Marty Reel, and I have an accounting background in finance. I worked for Titanium Metals Corporation in a couple of different locations and retired from there after 36 years in finance as a controller. Got bored with being retired and worked for the state of Nevada for 10 years as an auditor. Retired in 2014. I've lived in Boulder City for 45 years and love the city, and I'm very interested in seeing it continued. And I walked in with Marvis and I said, thank you for keeping the power on for the summer. I enjoyed the air conditioning. So I hope we can keep our rates low and keep the power on. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Shamow?
Yeah, my name is Ned Shamow. I was born and raised in Boulder City. I came to work in 1977 for the city as an electrical engineer, and ended up working here 32 years, retired 12 years ago as the electrical utility administrator. I love Boulder City. I have got a lot of good memories here. I have a vested interest in this town. My electricity is kind of my passion. I like playing with it and doing things with it, and seeing what I can do to make things better around here. This is a good place to live, and I think we have a lot going for us, and we're somewhat unique in a lot of respects, and I think we need to build on those and do what we can to keep the city the way it is.
Thank you. Chair Carr?
Speaking towards it, 'cause it turns out. Lived here in Boulder City for 46 years. I actually started reclamation as a student aide and worked my way up the ladder. I worked at Hoover Dam, and then I went over to Western Area Power as electrical engineering technician. Then came back in geology for a little bit. Then I spent pretty much my last year, 20 years in power. So I worked with Boulder Canyon Project, which is what Hoover was developed under, or built under, however you want to say it. And so I worked with the contracts for Hoover. It actually was a big portion of the last contracts for 50-year before I retired. I retired in 2016. And one of my jobs in power was a rate manager. So I dealt with the rates for what they call project use. And I think, so that was the original power associated with reclamation. So I think it has a little bit of consistency with Boulder City, with the history that Boulder City has. Power, the project use power, I think, has some similarities to it. So that's one thing I'm hoping to do too, is to keep track of the history of Boulder City and try to show, I guess, some of the differences that Boulder City has compared to the Valley. So, and then just hoping to use my experience with Hoover, data collection, et cetera, to help the committee and the council.
Thank you. And Vice Chair Wilkinson?
Hi, my name's Eileen Wilkinson. I came from Oregon in 2015. I worked for the city of Lincoln City in the finance department. I did everything between utility billing, that was my major job, also accounts payable, payroll, all sorts of accounts receivable. And with my experience in utility billing, I thought that would be helpful for this committee, and that's why I applied.
Thank you. I think it's obvious that the amount of experience we have on this committee is unique, probably for any city, especially one the size of Boulder City. But, being the home of Hoover Dam, I think we've heard that there are people who have been involved in electrical, water and wastewater. I view us as being fortunate to be able to have all these folks here and contributing their backgrounds and experience. The first item on the agenda is a discussion of utility infrastructure components. And I had spoken with Chair Carr about this. If we could just have a brief overview of how the systems operate and what the major components are. Chair Carr, I don't know if you want to do that, or Keegan, I know you're filling in for the utility director position right now. If we could start maybe with the electrical and how that's laid out without being in violation of Homeland Security rules.
I'm not sure I could do it justice with me being fairly new to this. For electric, I'm waiting on some printouts. That's it. For electric infrastructure, where do I begin? There's a number of projects that we got going on right now to get everything updated. A lot of our system was on an old 4 kV system that we've been working on upgrading to 12 kV. That's where we have power contractors in town doing a lot of work for us. We've got a number of substations that we're in the process of working towards to being able to take those offline. And then we're also working on redundancy. I've been told that there used to be a lot of power outages by us putting in like the new 69 kV loop that helps being able to loop the power so we don't have outages. We can route power in different directions. Keep us online and keep everybody cool, as Member Real was saying.
Member Shamow, I know you know this system very well. Anything that you'd like to add to that description?
Well, Boulder City pretty much inherited what we have from the federal government because the government built the city and built the town back in the 30s. And so, yeah, they started out originally with a 2300 volt system. And then at some point, many years ago, they converted that to a 4160 volt system. By adding, it was fairly simple to do. They just added a neutral to the lines and were able to change the transformers to the substation. And it made a lot of sense to do that. But then they implemented the 12 kV, 12,000 volt system, probably in the early 70s, I think, is when they went to that. And that worked for quite a few years. There were a lot of issues with that. The early days, if they weren't really, really careful when they assembled that, they'd have a lot of failures on the cable and the junctions and the splices. So there were quite a few outages for a number of years because of the problems with the 12 kV system, the higher voltage. The 4 kV system just seemed to work. You know, it was very forgiving. And so, yeah, over the years, the push was to always go to the 12 kV system, and finally that's happening, which is a good thing. It needs to be done. But other than that, the town has, one thing that's made it nice is the town has grown fairly slowly. So there was the ability to kind of keep up with the growth as the town grew. We added substations, but a lot of it's been done now. They've raised a lot of money the last few years with rates, and that's good because it means that a lot of the stuff that needs to be rebuilt is being rebuilt. And so another 2 or 3 years, you should have a really robust, very reliable system, I would think. It looks like things are headed the right direction anyway.
And Member Todd, I know that with your background also, you know the system pretty well. Anything you'd like to add?
Well, we've been talking about it the last couple meetings that we've been trying to get the money leveled out through the years to where we're not spiking our expenditures and then dropping them, but that's on for another topic. The other thing is that I feel as a committee member, along with some other members, that we're going to be replacing transformers in the remaining substations, and I'm talking about or trying to take and get it to where we can start looking at the purchase of them in the next couple of years, starting in this cycle or maybe the next cycle, to where we're not behind the 8 ball trying to buy them at a 20 or 30% markup with everybody else doing it. Because with some of the mandates that's coming from the federal government, I think that we are going to be short on power ability in our stations because we've undersized our transformers. So we're looking ahead at that right now as a committee. And I feel that's very important to be ahead of the curve instead of behind the curve and catching up. So that's one of my big things. And like Ned was saying, the town was basically built on a 2300 volt circuit, and then we went to what we call a commercial industrial 4160 volt in our old area. But the problem is that as we continued to buy new appliances and everything, new air conditioners, microwaves, and everything else in the houses, the system that's behind the houses, the overhead conductors and the secondary conductors cannot keep up with the demand. So we're trying to get that to where the old adage is if we raise the voltage, we can use a smaller conductor. So, and we can get more on that circuit. So that's what we're trying to accomplish in the community.
Thank you. Any other members that would like to comment on the electrical system?
I guess I'll make a few comments. I think one of the things right now, so we were looking at the 5-year plan and stuff, but we're looking at the major components that we're trying to work with. So I think part of the infrastructure issue that I keep on hearing is aging infrastructure. So we're trying to make sure the committee is also looking at is trying to figure out where we at with all the components. So we've got a pull program that we're working on that's currently ongoing, so that's going to help. We've got transformers, and we've got the different forms of transformers, the big substation transformers, the house transformers, we have the commercial transformers and some of that. We've got some of the ones, I guess, we had the underground cable on the capital program, and we don't have that on anymore. So it might be something we might want to look at. So I guess that's the one thing I'm a little concerned with, is just making sure how far out we're still going to have to go, 5th year, 26, 27, to keep looking at the different components. So we got big and small, and how does everything fit in?
Thank you. Shall we move on to water?
Sure. Similar to what Mr. Shamow was just saying, a lot of the water system is aging. We're in the process of updating it as we can. Some of the stuff that we're doing internally, some of it we have to hire out contractors, the larger projects, because we have a smaller crew. But it is an issue in some areas just because of the aging infrastructure. We've been doing water modeling just to make sure we have enough pressure, enough volume in the areas of town that we need it in. I believe we just finished that model, right, Mike? Yep, just finish that model. And then we can always, I know our irrigation, or our landscaping crews are gonna kind of piggyback off of that. So the water model will come in handy for lots of different things.
Mr. Anaya, you're probably our water expert in residence for this meeting. Anything you'd like to add?
I would agree with the aging infrastructure and maintaining all those systems. That's even, I mean, I just might as well speak for the wastewater side as well, but those are the things that really need to be looked at here. We don't have a water treatment process because we get the water already treated. It's a distribution system that has to be done, and this water modeling will help that tremendously if it's been done right and so forth. So that's a key, that'd be a key element for everyone. Wastewater wise, the treatment plant is a lagoon system. It's very adequate for what we have here in this town. But again, it's how to transfer everything to the wastewater treatment plant's the issue. Making sure the pump stations are fully operational. Odor control issues at lift stations are a big key element here, especially in our community, is the proximity of the stations, where they're located and whatnot. And the systems we have are good. We just got to maintain them and keep them up. So I think probably the collection system would be of my major concern, and making sure that in the older parts of town where we have all the conveyance pipes to the treatment plant, that those are ready and adequate in size to keep the flow going. So that's my part of it.
Would anyone like to comment on, we've had a couple of different ways that water comes to the city, is my understanding. Anyone want to comment on, the raw water system versus our drinking water system?
Well, we do have the raw water system that comes over from the Railroad Pass area. That is used in some areas of town. We're looking at ways of possibly using the raw water system in more areas, more parks, instead of using the treated water. Essentially, it's water for water. It's not really helping us with water conservation. That's why another item we're looking at is being able to use treated effluent for irrigation. And then, as Mr. Nala said, we do get our water from SNWA. It comes pre-treated. We just have to distribute it.
And that, my understanding is that is the only outstanding debt that we have is with the water, with that raw water system. And we have been able to make some changes on the financing to save a little bit of money there.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I've mentioned it to you that the copper in the old part of the city seems to be holding up better than the plastic in the newer parts of the city, but.
Yeah, we have it's going to be a multi-year program, but we're going to go through, we've already started a couple years ago with replacing the water services. We can only do so much a year, but we're picking away at it as fast as we can.
All right. Anyone else wishing to make a comment on water or wastewater? Okay, and the last component of the utility fund is the landfill, and you want to give us a brief overview of that, please?
Yeah, we have a third party that actually runs that for us, Boulder Disposal. We do work with them directly for CIP projects. We're working through a phasing plan. And also doing volumetric calculations, part of some of the requirements that we have to do. And that's about all I have for the landfill.
Yeah, it's a dump, so I think most of us understand that.
Yep.
But we do have capacity there. I think that's probably the key takeaway.
Yep.
Questions or comments from council members? All right. Any other comments from members of the Utility Advisory Committee on infrastructure components? All right, we'll move to item number 2 then, discussion and review of ongoing and 5-year capital improvement plan projects.
In case anybody didn't print out the backup, I've got copies of the spreadsheets for item number 2. So the front page here, and also in the backup, is our ongoing CIP as of July 31st. This is just a list of the electric, water, sewer, and landfill projects that we have going on. I can run down through them or highlight the ones you guys want to know about, however you guys wish to hear it.
I know we do have an upcoming next month, a specific workshop for the council. Again, I think what I talked with Chair Carr about is to get feedback from the committee on this list, things that maybe need to be accelerated, and might be able to be pushed off a little bit. So, Chair Carr, is there anything that you would like to comment on regarding this list of capital improvement projects?
Yeah, I guess just to emphasize the starting point we're at, we have to realize that we have to look at the prior year capital, so what we still have to do before we even figure out if we can do all of the stuff in the future, the 5-year plan. So I think if I understand, Keegan, you're working on a plan to figure out how we, because electrical is the one that's backed up the most. The rest of them, I don't think are backed up as too bad, but we've focused on electrical more than anything else, because it's got a lot of the money involved and it's got a lot of projects. So we still, I think this year we'll have to focus on water and sewer more, because we haven't really done that, but we'll work into it. So it's a matter of trying to get the plan. I think Keegan was saying before, is how do we get, I think we have 18 electrical projects right now. We've got to get those done, or I think part of the plan could be that we might have to push them off till we can get to the other ones. So that's what, and that was one of the reasons I thought the infrastructure was important to talk about first, because then you understand where does it set, where do these set within the relationship to bringing the infrastructure up to speed, and what can we push back or do. Because we got some of the ones from 2021 that we haven't even started yet, I believe. So that maybe that might be, some of them have to be done because they got to be in order. But that's the key thing, is the priorities. And so I don't know if there's anything on the ongoing that Keegan or anybody else would say that would be either something that would just sort of throw out there that might be pushed out, or something that's sort of important that going to be done, like the Boulder City tap to Buchanan line. So that one I guess is another delay, or are we looking at the calendar year still, or?
That one's ongoing right now. I've heard that they had to pull their crews to go finish up another project, but I'm told that they're coming back. They're actually going to do some night work in front of the school. They're going to have to shut down both lanes, so we worked with them to coordinate so they would do night work so we're not impacting all the students. Last I heard, they're still on schedule to finish this calendar year, but we'll see if that happens, because we know with all the fires and hurricanes that it's hard to come by linemen right now. Fortunately, they've been doing a good job for us.
So is there any projects that have you had time to review, any projects that might be slipped, or if that, maybe that's not the best word, but?
No, I know what you're saying. Yeah, all the projects that are on that list for electrical, they all need to be done. They're not in order as you see them on this list. In working with our electrical supervisor, Marvis, he was telling me which feeder projects need to go first, because we have to get the feeder projects upgraded, and then we'll be able to take some transformers offline because we're getting everything upgraded. So I can't really point at one and say, yeah, this one needs to be pushed. all need to be done. And that was a discussion that I've had with Chair Carr of, do we just leave them on this list and get to them in the order that we need to get to them? Or do we take them off the list and then put them on future CIP when we think we can get to them? I can see it going either way. I'm leaning towards just leaving them on the ongoing list. They've been funded, they've been approved, and if for some reason we get more help and are able to get through some of these projects quicker, then we'd just be able to roll right over into the next project. One of our biggest hurdles right now is we're trying to do some of the design work in-house for these smaller projects. Unfortunately, we only have one guy downstairs in our engineering department that can do this work. We've tried hiring consultants to help us out with putting the plans together and haven't been very successful. We're making a few more phone calls to other reputable consultants that know how to do this electrical design to see if they can help us. Because that's one of the biggest things holding us up for these smaller projects like the feeder 53, feeder 63, 64. The bigger projects, we haven't had an issue with it, where it's fairly easy to find a consultant that can do design for us and then construct it for us.
Member Shamow, did you have a comment?
Well, I thought I would maybe lay out some of the background. A lot of the work revolves around the conversion of the 4 kV to the 12 kV, because there were originally two stations, substation number 1, which is over by the city shops, and substation number 2, which is the station down below the ball fields on Avenue B. Those are the 4 kV stations, the 4,000 volt systems that basically powered the old original town site. And so in order to convert that over to 12 kV, you've got to go through all those overhead lines, most of them were overhead lines, and convert the insulators, and a lot of those cross arms were old, needed to be replaced. And so the poles, surprisingly enough, even though they're approaching almost 100 years old, 90 years old, the poles are still in pretty good shape, most of them. There's a few that needed to be changed, and they're being changed. But so the conversion, you basically had to go through and re-insulate all those lines so that they could handle the higher voltage, the 12,000 volt system. And then you had to change the feeder routings in order to do away with those two stations. Are going to be removed. They're going to be gone. And so that part of the town is going to be put on the newer 12,000 volt system, the 12 kV system. And those are substations 3, which is located out at the end of Adams, and substation 4, which is located over just off of Industrial Road on the highway there, across from Albertsons. And then substation 5 is located down on the lower end of Buchanan, across from the Veterans Park. And then substation 6 is the new stations down in Henway Valley. So you can see this, they're kind of scattered in the perimeter of the town. So you have to, that's when they talk about this has to all be done in order, you have to basically free up lines that used to carry 4 kV, and they have to be converted to 12 kV, so that you can tie those old systems into the newer substations. And it's quite a process. It's an ongoing deal, and there's a lot of work involved, but they're moving along very rapidly, and it seems like it's coming to a pretty good conclusion in the next couple of years. It looks like it's about going to be done, so it's almost there. So anyway, I just thought it was kind of a little bit of a background of what this is all about, but it's a fairly involved project.
Thank you. And I believe we did accelerate, actually, the changeover with some additional funding 2 years ago, which would have been for last year's work. Again, it's been said that is something that has to happen before other things can happen.
Sorry, Mayor.
Go ahead.
To add to that, so we have our list of ongoing ones, and then in the committee we've been looking at, in your packet you'll see 22 through 26. We're using last year's to present it to the committee and to you guys today to talk through it before we go through and make any changes. But what the main thing that I've gathered out of the committee is, since we do have such a large list of ongoing projects that we know needs to happen before a lot of the ones that are on the future CIP, of maybe shifting around some of the ones for next fiscal year and possibly pushing some of those out, because if we can't get to all the ones that are on the ongoing list, it's going to be hard to get to future ones. So we'd just be adding more that we're not getting to. Some of them, of course, that we can run congruently with the ongoing ones, so we wouldn't want to move everything off of 23 and leave it blank, but there are some that we can move.
Well, and I think, you know, the question that has been brought up by members of the public too is that we budget this work and the money is showing as being available, but the projects can't get started. And so it just creates this rollover of the budget that makes it appear money that should be spent or has been assigned just carries forward year after year. That looks like we have a much larger surplus than what we actually do.
Yep, very true.
Just for my information, and maybe other people wonder this too, since a lot of these projects have been budgeted, and am I hearing you right that it's absence of manpower availability, or is it an absence of design so that it can be completed?
A little bit of both.
A little bit of both.
Or
So-
maybe a lot of bit of both.
Okay, so what would it take? What is missing so that this could be expedited a little quicker? What resources do we need?
Some of it is kind of out of our control. Our electric division is down 2 linemen. We've been down 2 linemen for a long time. Unfortunately, we can't find anybody to hire. We thought we had one, but he had some health issues. So if we don't even have a full crew, we can't do some of the in-house work that we want to do. PAR has been tremendous help for us because they've been coming in and doing a lot of the 4 kV to 12 kV work. I'll be coming back to council to ask to add a little bit of money to that to get them finished out through this fiscal year. Yes, design help would be nice. But again, that's kind of out of our hands. We've had a engineering technician position open in engineering downstairs for a long time as well, and it's hard to find someone that, let alone it doesn't just fit one aspect that we're looking for or the whole package that we're looking for. I think a lot of the consulting firms are picking up those guys and they're paying them fairly well. Kind of beside the point, but I think if they looked at our overall package, they would probably prefer to work here, but again, beside the point.
And it's not a worthwhile expenditure to go outside of the city for some of that?
Some of it is. We've had a couple consultants in the last year that we've asked to see if they can help us with some of these smaller design projects. And unfortunately, it probably wasn't in their wheelhouse. And then we get the information from them, and then we end up having to almost redo the whole thing. The city engineer, Jim Keene, and I are reaching out to a couple people that we've worked with in the past. One guy out of Phoenix, his firm's out of Phoenix. I think that he should be able to help us. We've made contact with him, so he's looking at some stuff. There are some larger consulting firms that I think can help. It gets very expensive, but it might come down to that just so we can get these projects done, that we have to pay a little bit more. As I'm sure all you guys can guess, construction's going way up, consulting fees are going way up. It's just the nature right now.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
On the consulting, did Dennis pass along that he was saying that CRC could help some? I guess it's at the higher voltage.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought there was a project or two at least. Is that being pursued, or is it?
Yep, we're already in discussions with them.
Okay. I'll make sure the council gets their chance. Sorry.
And Councilmember Jorgensen, to follow up on the actual recruitment side of the employees, we are working on trying to reach out to some other professional organizations to try to attract for those lineman positions, working with Nellis Air Force Base to get our open positions sent out to them for any service members exiting the military, things of that nature. So we are trying to do a few more things, but it'll just take some time.
And I think, based on past discussions as well, to reassure the public, we're not necessarily talking about systems that are at the point of failure. It's that we have these phased projects and they have to be done in a certain order. But the systems itself are, again, I know we've used the term aging infrastructure several times, but we're not at the point of failure. I mean, is that correct? Or?
That is correct. Yeah, we're doing very well right now. I just actually had a discussion with our electric supervisor this morning, and he was telling me about the great strides we've made in the recent years. And he says we're having minimal outages compared to what they used to have. So we're in good shape right now, but like you were just saying, we got to put this puzzle together in a certain order, and we can't get to some of those projects.
Yeah, and I guess the point I'm trying to make is that, you know, if we were at a point where things were failing, then we would have to go and look for funding to get these projects done. We want to get them done, but we have time to get the resources together and not be in a situation where we're having to pay top dollar for all of that work. Member Todd, anything that you'd like to add to the electrical portion of it?
I think what you're saying is absolutely correct. It's a sequence of operations. Once we figure out the sequence of operations, we got to have the manpower and the material available. So I think that we're pretty good at that, looking ahead at the curve and making sure we have the material available to do the jobs. It's just we don't have the hands to install it. And that's where it's becoming a problem. And we're not the only community. I'm still in contact with a lot of people over in Los Angeles, and they're paying much better than us, and they're still having trouble filling line positions. So trust me, it's all over the United States. And the more of these catastrophic events we have across the United States, the less we have employees that want to work in this area because it's low pay. The benefits are great, and the living conditions are great, but cash on a barrelhead is what they're all working for.
Anyone else want to comment on any particular projects or aspects of it? Chair Carr?
So, were we gonna go over the 5-year plan more, or just the general?
We can.
Well, just because I think you'd mentioned that the 23 could be put. I think 23 is actually in good shape. We're not too bad for this coming fiscal year. It's 24 that needs a lot of look at, and that's going to be one of the big puzzle pieces to figure out.
Member Todd was saying earlier, we're trying to level out the year to year so we don't have the big spikes. If you're looking at 23, we have about $2.5 million, and then you go $9.5 million, then back down. 25 doesn't have much in it, but if we can try to level those out and still be able to do it in the sequence that we want to do it, we need to shift some of those around. Unfortunately for 24, it's got the big ticket items of rebuilding some of the substations, and there's not really a way around it. At our last committee meeting, we were trying to figure out ways to purchase some of the equipment up front to save money, because construction costs and purchasing costs are going up 10-20% every year. So if we can afford to purchase some transformers now, that would save us money down the road, and then we'll be ready for them in a couple years.
Councilmember Bridges?
Yeah, I have a question, and I don't mean this to sound snarky, but how do you avoid the situation again of the ongoing Facebook discussion of the transformer in the desert, and leaking oil, and why is this thing there, and it's a waste of money. And I do agree personally that you buy the equipment when it's the best time to buy it, especially financially, and you may have to hold on to it. And in the long run, there was nothing wrong with what happened. And, sometimes the court of public opinion tends to sway people, and they don't understand. Maybe it's a public relations issue more than a utility issue in terms of buying now when it's the best time to buy, because prices are going to go up, but continually communicating with the public that it's safe and it's okay and it's not a problem and we're not wasting money.
Yeah, with the one that was on Facebook that you're talking about, I believe we saved over $1 million by pre-purchasing that.
Sure.
And we got an extended warranty on it. I just think probably the full story wasn't out to the public. There was no issues with that. It was all a plus for the city purchasing that early. Yeah, we had some minor maintenance issues with it that could have happened if we bought the transformer today and installed it tomorrow. It just because it sat for a little bit doesn't, no.
So the one comment that the committee had talked about, Todd and Greg and Ned had been working with Marvis on our last meeting, was whether we would even possibly start in '22 with purchasing. So you start looking at purchasing, and they're looking at 6 transformers, I believe, for the overall substation. So if we start looking at it, and you look at, okay, you get together with a manufacturer and say, okay, we're gonna order 6 from you, purchase 2 now, and then get them in line. So get them ready, so when we need them, we have them. And that's another way we can shift some of the money too. We should actually shift it back. And we have the cash right now, so we can do that. And so that's some of the things I think. And then also thing we need to look at is, I think that's what we need to look at is some of the substations could possibly be shifted a little forward, because we don't need to do all 3 substations in 1 year, do we?
No.
So those are things, and then the other minimal one was, it was talked about, the last committee member, was the cutover and the substation removals, and that can be broken out. That's, the money there isn't that big for 1.5, but I'm not sure that's gonna be the full amount by the time we get there anyway.
Yeah.
So if you split it up, and if I understood correctly, Marvis was mentioning that it is doable, so we just say, okay, let's do cut over from the 4K to the 12 in 1 year, and we do the substation removals in another year or so. And just, that's another way to sort of spread it out.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt anything. After we switch the power over to the 12 kV, it doesn't hurt anything to have that substation sitting there rather than people seeing it.
But if we're having issues, and the other one, the thing I guess with the ongoing is that I think the biggest thing is everybody's saying now is how do we put this puzzle together? That's the big issue. But I would like to look at shifting some of the projects that are ongoing. If the priority shifts way down, then it might be advantageous to shift it and its money. That way, when we talk about the revenue review, the rate review, it would be handy to understand what we're expecting to actually pay. So, because lately we've been having like $19 million, anywhere from 15 to 19 to $20 million in projects, and we're spending 6. So it's hard to understand what we really have to collect, because we have a certain amount of we have a lot of the cash here, but if we were to get all of these done, then it'd be interesting to see how much cash we actually have. So if we move the money around a little bit, or at least play with the puzzle and see how it works, I'd like to at least look at it that way. Whoops, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor, why don't we go through the utility CIP 22-26 like we've done at our meetings? A lot of the substation removal projects, you get a bit more bang for your buck if you have more than one of them to be removed, because your salvage guys will come in and pull them out and strip them out for the metals. So there are certain things that I worked on with the city at a meeting that we had. Marvis, how long ago was that meeting we had? 4 months ago? And so I've got my rough draft here, and we could go through it pretty quick and just update what we have in process right now and what we need to get done. And one of them is, in order to pull, just for your information, substation 1 out, which is in the city yard, that feeds the Red Mountain distribution line. Now, the Red Mountain distribution line is the radar for all the airplanes coming into McCarran Airport. You're not going to want to shut that off while you're waiting to put it into another station. So that has to be done first. So that's the sequence that we were talking about at all our meetings. So the CIP from 22 through 26, as was printed up by the city, has some deviations, but it's not that far off. And I can go through here, and with what we did at the meeting we had, some of the things, like for example, Electric 20-103, which is the Red Mountain Line rebuild, that has to be done in this year, this money year, okay? But now we've got a problem. We have the cable, we have the insulators, we don't have the personnel. So now how do you do that? You contract that out? Well, even the contractor doesn't have personnel. So now what do you do with it? It has to be done FY22 in order to proceed for the next Tetris cycle that we're working on all these different projects. The removal of substation 1 and substation 2, which is down behind the ball diamond on Adams, once we do the cutover within the old town area and we're on 12 kV, those stations can sit. We can cut the conductors to them, leave them sitting there with the fence around and lock the fence up, and if we come back in FY '26 and tear them out, that's fine. That's something that's not a high priority, but yet, in the beginning of this thing, it was a pretty tight thing. It was supposed to be done in FY '24. So we've already moved stuff around, but much to our surprise, when we had our last capital infrastructure improvement in our meeting with the group, the stuff that we'd spent so much time working on was gone. We were back to a $9 million budget in FY '24. And it was like, wait a minute, how'd this happen? Because we worked on it to get it leveled out. It's down to, in '24, it's down to $5,350,000. Well, that isn't what we agreed upon, and that wasn't what we were looking at. So this is the problem we're having as a committee right now. So that's why I'm saying we have to take a good hard look at it. Marvis and I, and Keegan wasn't involved in it, but we decided on, we needed 33 MVA transformers, right, Marvis? 6 of them, right? 35s? 25s, okay. So we're back down to a little 25. So anyways, so what we were talking about doing is going out and saying, okay, we need 6 of them at 25 MVA, which I know to some people is Greek. But the thing is, if we can get a package deal, put money down once we get a set contract price, put money down to get these transformers started in production, and then take 2 of them every year. And that would take and be good. And that way we level out our pay going back to the contractor that's going to build them, the manufacturer, and we level that pay money out that's going to have to go to all these transformers, because a set of these transformers is needed for substation 3, substation 4, and I think it was it substation 5? Yeah, 5. So that's 6 transformers. But the thing is, you're better off to have the parts here here in town than to be scrambling for them when you're ready to receive them. And so that's what we were trying to do at the last meeting we had. So that's some of the things that we wanted to talk to you as the council today and understand what we're trying to do as the UAC and get this stuff straightened out and get it rolling. Because we all know steel doesn't rust in the desert. So the transformers come with oil in them, so there's no dried out paper or anything. And then if we have to, we could probably set them in a spot where we could circulate the oil in them, keep everything running just like it was going to be hooked up to the power, but have them at the ready. So as soon as we need them, we've got 4 alike. So what that does is eliminate spare parts, different from every single transformer. Okay, and we have spare parts that'll handle all 6 of them, like pumps, fans, stuff like that. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to streamline the electrical process. The water is the same way. Keegan had a real great idea. Hey, we're going to take and go in and we're going to redo a street, rehab a street, grind it down. And we said, why don't we get in there and do the services for the copper water lines? That makes sense. And put the new 8-inch valves in underground. That makes sense. And then repave the street. So this is the stuff we're working with the city and working with the members of the committee to get this stuff straightened out. And what's really frustrating to me, and Ned and I go back many years, I worked for LA Water and Power out here. This was my home for 27 years on temporary assignment. I could not move to Boulder City, but I could work at McCullough Switching Station and Marketplace Switching Station and everything down in the valley. And I actually traveled all the way up to Ely, Nevada. That was my route. So to be out here and see this and not be able to get the brass ring to move in permanent was really frustrating, but they wouldn't transfer me out here. I was on a rotational assignment for construction projects, and I built some big projects. So that's the background, but that's what we're trying to give to the city. And the thing is that you all understand is this is donation of our time, efforts, and knowledge for no cost. And that's what's frustrating to us sometimes.
Yes, and you know, I know that the pandemic had an impact, but you know, my intent is we do not see canceled meetings any longer of the UAC. You know, I firmly believe with the amount of money that goes through this, we absolutely need input on these decisions, and the ability to level out these costs year to year, I think is critical. If we're trying to get a handle on our rate situation, we will talk about that later. That sounds like an approach that certainly needs to be considered in the capital improvement program, is maybe purchase some of these things. I'm assuming with these transformers, the technology probably does not change. Is that correct? I mean, it stays very, very similar. We're not talking about purchasing a piece of equipment and having it be obsolete within 5 years, right?
That is a correct statement. And the thing is once the technology, once you've settled on a brand and a type of internal and the temperature requirements and everything else, they can crank those out pretty fast, because the problem you got to do is if they can buy the material to build the transformers ahead of time, they can lower the cost from the manufacturing standpoint. So if you got a commitment of transformers from a company, they can go out and pre-purchase a lot of the materials, and it'll sit in their warehouse until they need it. And that's what I'm trying to do, is reduce the overall cost to where every transformer is a custom unit.
And that's the key, is the fact that they're all the same design, because usually when you buy a transformer, it's always a different design. If the factories, they can only do so many at a time, and it's a big deal. It takes several months to a year to build a transformer. But if you got 6 of them that are paper cutters, basically it's a lot cheaper, and you probably get a better product.
Thank you for that clarification.
We have reached out to some of those manufacturers, and exactly what you were just saying, we can save some money if we were to purchase in bulk, bulk meaning 4 or 6, just because of the design or the study that they have to do when they're building it. There is one hurdle. What we were discussing in our last committee meeting was, is there a way that we can put 25% now, 50 next year, and 25 the third year? Unfortunately, the way these manufacturers work, if you pay 25%, they're going to build 25%. They need the money. So we might have to get a little creative on how we're moving the funding or moving the projects, but I'm all for pre-purchasing these, because what everybody's been saying is we're going to save money by doing that.
And, you know, as far as once the substation's been decommissioned, you know, they've been sitting there for 60 to 90 years. You know, we'll make it an art installation for the last 3 years or something.
Yeah.
But again, I agree with Member Todd that there's no driving factor where we can't leave these in place for a couple of years and then have something done with one crew at one time and not worry about piecemealing it.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments from council members, committee members? Shall we go through the other projects then as we look out over the next 5 years?
Sure. You're talking about switching to water, sewer, or staying on the electric page and looking at the future projects?
Any further discussion needed then on the electric items that anyone sees? And I guess what I'm getting out of what Member Todd and Member Shamow have said is, you know, these items are necessary, but we may need to look at reordering them as far as the timing of equipment purchases, material purchases, and preparation to do these things. But we can, again, level out the funding each year and be able to do the projects, you know, as they're needed, as that puzzle piece is needed.
Yep. Between working with the experience and expertise of the committee and Marvis, our electrical supervisor, I believe we have a good idea of what order these need to go in. We just need to put them in priority instead of just having them down in not alphabetical order, but project number order.
Okay. And we do have a separate item to talk about the funding.
Yep.
So we'll stay on the projects right now. So as far as electrical then, anything that anyone would like to ask or offer on that? All right.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I just want to reemphasize, but make sure it's clear that we really need to look hard at fiscal year '24 and try to spread that out. So just, that's something before it gets voted on, I think. So we got a few, what is our time frame now with the final vote? I mean, not with the approval from the council.
I don't want to spill the secrets to council, but I was planning on we're going to have a workshop on October.
We always enjoy being the last to know.
I know, I'm just teasing. October 6th, we're having a workshop to discuss all CIP items, not just utilities. And then my hope was to be able to bring it back again in late October, early November, to have them at an official meeting where they can give direction, because the workshop is more just discussion. And if everybody has been able to digest everything and is okay with everything, we could do tentative adoption at that point, but that's not necessary. My hope is to have it officially adopted in December. But last year, because of COVID, and because of the number of projects we were going through, we extended that. We pushed it into the spring, and it made some of our workshops and council meetings a little bit longer, having to deal with the operating budget and the CIP, but it gave council more time to be able to review the projects, discuss the projects, and ultimately adopt it. So we don't have a drop-dead date of the first meeting in December, to answer your question.
That helped, because I think we need to work with the puzzle, and so I don't, we've got, looks like October is confusing now, how we're gonna do that meeting. And so I think we need about 2 meetings, probably minimum, to try to get an idea. So I don't see that we would have a report or some help until probably December.
Okay.
So that's what I was just checking to see. Because if we start moving some of these around for the rate purposes and budget purposes and stuff like that, I think it's going to take a little time.
Okay.
Anyone else on electric? All right, if you want to move to water then.
Looking at the 5-year plan for water, one of the biggest items that we've touched on earlier is the water services. That's going to be ongoing. You see that one extend all the way across all 5 years here, and it'll probably extend for another 5 years unless we get a surplus of cash and can do bigger projects. Also, valve replacement. We have a number of valves because of the aging infrastructure that some of them are hard to exercise, open, close. So that's more projects that we need to continue moving forward. We don't have, the projects aren't specific to, we need to change the valve on at this address. We just know we have a number of them to do. As we're doing our roadway projects, that's the perfect time to do it. We can save a little bit of money on these water projects, and similar with wastewater. If we get a contractor in there to do that project, and then right behind it, we have our paving contractor coming in right behind them, we can save money by doing that. So those are some of the bigger ticket items on the water side.
Any members of the committee that have comments on the water?
I got
Member Reel?
Sorry.
Well, this isn't just about water, but Key just mentioned the fact that if we get a surplus of funds, and it's the same thing with going out ahead of time to buy the electrical stuff. I hope that the city council is looking at the finance report to the city manager, usually at the second council meeting of each month, of how much funds we have. Boulder City is very, very lucky in the fact that we do have money. And, they just put out a report to quarterly financial statements for last year, and it says, in accordance with NRS 268, City of Boulder City hereby publishes notices of the following receipts and disbursements. Well, last year, for the year, we had receipts of $21 million more than we had disbursements. And if you look at the finance director's report to City Council each month, let's see what, I just had it here. We have like $130 million in the bank. I wasn't gonna use the number. But we, and we're not making any money having that money in the bank. Very low interest rate. And I'm sure that if we spent some of that money on transformers and equipment that we need, we would be money ahead.
Thank you. And I know that Mr. Tedder and I have spoken at length. There are different times. We need to take a closer look at those surpluses. The materials situation, as Member Todd had pointed out, it's not going to get any easier over the next 4 to 5 years with the amount of funding that's coming out across the country. So if there are things that can be done now, we're probably going to be saving our ratepayers money by doing them now. Member Todd?
There's a lot of different funding methods to buy equipment, large equipment, but I'll tell you what, if you tell the person who's manufacturing the equipment we got cash, they're gonna love you. They'll give you a discount.
Like everybody, cash is still king.
Yeah, and they will give you a discount. We used to buy 230 kV circuit breakers, and we put an order in for 20 of them. ABB about fell over backwards. They actually moved a factory here into the States to build those circuit breakers for us. We call them spiders, upside down spiders. They're 230 kV. And for some reason, the engineer of record decided to put me as point person for delivery. And I was receiving these doggone circuit breakers from the Port of Los Angeles all the way up to Owens Valley and all the way out here to McCullough. So it was quite a job. And they just had my number, and they'd call me on speed dial and said, and then as soon as it was done, then what it was the guy who received them, we had a race to get the paperwork in, and they immediately were able to ask for a 2% discount on every circuit breaker they got in for cash. And they mailed them a certified check, and it was done. And I'll tell you what, it was a nice feeling to save the kind of money we were saving on the project. So it can be done, and cash is king.
And I will add, so Boulder City is very unique in the fact that it is essentially a pay-as-you-go financing community. So typically for any project, we don't take out any debt. So we do have to have a certain amount of reserves and things of that nature in the bank to, make sure that we can cover any unexpected expenses. But staff can definitely look at those reserve targets and making sure that they're met, and then, we could look at projects. So.
And we know that there are 2 bills pending in Congress that may result in additional funding for some of these projects as well. Depending on the outcome of those bills, that could change plans as far as making advanced purchases also. Okay. Any questions or comments on specific items on the water? Chair Carr?
So I guess, because you're going to bring it up maybe at the workshop, but the one thing I've been trying to understand with the reservoir improvements, there was talk about doing it 2 ways. One way was to drain the reservoir, and one way was to do it with divers with it full. So is the money in these? Do you know if that's and is that the complete reservoir improvements, or is just part of it?
I'm not sure. I'll bring up the expert.
Good afternoon, Michael No, the Water and Wastewater Division Supervisor. For the reservoir improvements, we expect that the valve should be able to be replaced with the reservoir still in service without having to drain it by allowing the divers to get into the valve vault. And the funding, expect that funding to cover that expense.
Now, is that water modeling that you're doing, does that include all this, or is there something else? Because that was one thing I was trying to remember from that we had when we had the consultant come and talk to us. If I remember correctly, they didn't have all the answers there, it was, we reviewed it, and you're in good shape, and we suggest this, but we need to review more. And is that what part of the water modeling is trying to get more understanding of the rest of the system, or?
Yes, understand more of the system and also do some further evaluations of the reservoirs.
Okay, so we might need to put some more additional money or in additional years, if I'm understanding.
Possibly.
Okay, I'm just trying to get an understanding, so.
Yeah.
Again, when you get to the rate aspect, we need to understand what to expect, and how soon, and in what years. Thank you.
Hey, Mike, so how many, are these are the valves that are the outflow valves out of those reservoirs? Is that the ones you're talking about?
Yes.
So how many valves are in the mix here? How many need to be replaced?
For sure, one, which would be the main exit valve.
Okay.
There are some valves that separate the two basins, the Twin 5 reservoirs, as 2 5-million-gallon basins. Those valves are frozen up also.
So I remember from the photos that they showed us at the time, they looked like they were in pretty bad shape underwater there, but they think they can basically do it with divers?
That's what we've been told, yes.
Really? Well, that makes sense if they can. Yeah, it's a good idea.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other specific water items or any other questions or comments on water items?
One other, I misspoke when I said that when we're talking about the service replacements and the valves, we don't have specific streets or addresses picked out. I misspoke about that. We are looking at reconstructing Bermuda Dunes and some of the neighboring streets with our TC funds in the near future. So I would like to add Bermuda Dunes water services and valves to next year's CIP, as long as the funding is there. It makes perfect sense. Do the water services, valves. We're going to look at getting the sewer system cambered just to make sure, because I don't want to pave it and then realize, oh, we should have done that 50-foot chunk of collection system.
Yeah, and always talk to, Cox Communications, Southwest Gas.
Yep.
Everybody has something they may like to do.
It's usually right after we stripe the street.
As soon as the truck is gone, somebody wants to cut it open.
On the wastewater side, as we were saying earlier, aging infrastructure. We have a number of manholes that need to be resurfaced or repaired. We do have some of our sewer mains that need to be rehabilitated, looking at different options to be able to handle some of those projects. The one is that, make sure I'm on the right line. Yeah, the lift station 1, that's the one at the bottom, correct, Mike?
Lift station 1 is right there by the Chamber of Commerce.
Okay. Right by the Chamber of Commerce, and that's the one that we were having the sewer odor issues. So that's one of the projects that we're looking at. We've had a number of odor complaints from there. Michael and his staff have been doing what they can to knock the odors down, but when we do the improvements, we can put in some better equipment, newer equipment to help address that.
And again, I would just say on something like that, because it looks like you're getting close to $500,000 for that particular project. There needs to be some type of evaluation, return on capital. What other projects are necessary? If it's odor control that's impacting, 20, 30 people, as long as it's not creating a illness situation, that's a lot of money to spend for a handful of people.
Yep. Yeah, if it was just the odor, we'd definitely find a cheaper way to do it, but it's overall improvements to the lift station. But I understand what you're saying is $500,000 to fix 20 residences versus another project that could affect 200 residences.
Yes.
I'm curious about that, because that station's only 15 years old, if I remember right, when they built it. I would have thought that, because odor's always been a problem, so I would have thought that they would have had that addressed when they built that thing, but apparently not, huh?
No, Mike's guys have been dealing with that with the last year or two,
Really,
more than that.
really, okay.
What are we using for odor treatment, odor control?
I had that, but I forgot.
We're using a sulfate. It's called Helix Commander. So Helix is the manufacturer and Commander is the product that we inject into the lift stations. So focuses on reducing hydrogen sulfides.
Right, okay.
Is it because the well has the opportunity, the well has a airspace above it, and is that the stuff that's escaping and you're getting the odor from the well before it's pumped on up the hill, or is that the deal, or?
Yes.
Do you think there would be a way that they could pull that air out of there and clean it up? I thought there were systems to do that.
There is
You can treat the air.
yeah. The system. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, no, go for it.
The system that does exist, I believe they're currently having a sewer modeling done as we speak. But I've always felt that it's probably undersized. And it's across the street actually where there's a concrete structure with some bark in it where the sprinklers cover that with water. I've always felt that's undersized and one reason why.
Those bark systems are not reliable. They're
Right.
pretty terrible, but, okay, well, we can talk on that on something other than, just want to know what you're having. I'm good.
Keegan?
Yes.
I just know that there was, before also a smell as you were coming right into town. Is that the area, or up in that area, remember? And then they had to go in and also do the same thing to try to reduce the smell in that area. There was a lot of complaints.
Are you talking about right where Buchanan and the Parkway intersect? Yeah, I'm not sure if it's coming right from that intersection. I think we were having some issues there, but then there is a lot of odor complaints that come out of the parking lot just to the south. We've assisted the property owners there. Unfortunately, it's their system. I believe it had something to do with the laterals being so flat. So it just has, the gases build up in there. It's not flowing as quickly. And then it's also getting plugged up at times.
Well, that area, that's by the Albertsons?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is historically, I mean, 30 years ago, that was a problem. But that's where the pressurized lines coming up from the lift stations down the valley, that's where they top the hill. And at that point, the water goes from the pipe is absolutely full of sewage at that point, and it tops the hill, and then it starts to flow. And so at that point, that's where the gases are all released off the top of that water, and so it comes up the manholes, out of the manhole covers. And I know they used to try to address it at the manholes, but that didn't work very well either, so I don't know, it's always been a problem.
Yeah.
But again, there is that difference between whether it's part of the city system or if it's private property before it gets to the city system. All right.
I'm with much fascination on this system. The thing I didn't see or I don't see, is there a vacuum breaker when that pressurized system becomes gravity flow? Is there a vacuum breaker on that center of that street or in that parkway?
Not that I'm aware of. No.
Well, it wouldn't be too hard to put a vacuum breaker in there and introduce some more air into that rather than taking and have it all of a sudden free fall down, all the way down Buchanan. If you get some more air behind that thing, now you've got, instead of just the manhole, the holes for the manhole is what we're talking about. I think we've got to entertain that idea. And then the other thing, which I used many, many, many years ago, it was over in Pasadena for a water quality lab. We had to get some special blowers that sat on the roof and would shoot the odor up 60 feet in the air. And it was a high-speed blower. It didn't make much noise, but boy, did it work. And it got rid of all the problems of the chem lab and the water quality lab in the city of Pasadena for water and power. And that's how they did it. They actually had it was almost like a Venturi effect, where it would shoot that air up it would shoot the air coming out of the chem lab hoods and everything else that was in there. It would shoot it up almost 50, 60 feet in the air. And that might be something we want to look at down there across from CVS and the new 7-Eleven.
I believe weren't we looking at some watertight lids also? Yes. Watertight lids to, I've heard that works, but I'm getting a head shake no from Mr. Todd.
They make a really neat device, and anybody that has a mobile home or lives in a trailer, an RV, now they make it in a small form. It's a 2-inch one-way vacuum valve that only allows the air to go into the system, not expel out.
Okay.
And it sounds really kind of interesting, but what I'm asking about is when you're pushing a liquid with solids up over a hill and it breaks gravity, then all of a sudden you're looking for air.
Oh, yeah.
And if you don't have enough air going into that pipe, you're going to have the odors expel.
Yep.
So that's all I was asking about.
Yep.
Sorry, Mayor, just wanted to clarify, are we still talking about a current ongoing improvement project if we should try to stick back to those ongoing projects? It sounds more of like a different issue. I'm concerned that we're straying off of the agenda item.
Well, again, I think what we are talking about are capital improvement projects in general, but yes, I thank you for making sure we stay on topic.
I have nothing else to add to the sewer unless there's questions.
Any other questions or comments? Landfill, I guess, was the last one. You had mentioned that briefly.
Yeah, we have nothing on the future CIP, no requests anyways, but we do have the landfill expansion and the phasing plan that's on the ongoing list. So as of right now, we're not going to have any requests for the landfill for the upcoming CIP.
Okay, and I guess there is one thing that we did not mention under wastewater is the fact that the discussions that have occurred with SNWA regarding potential upgrades, that may be a project that we need to look at as far as what the city responsibility might be on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's my understanding that SNWA is looking into partnering with the city on an upgrade or an expansion of the treatment facility so we can treat the effluent to a level that we could use it for irrigation. I've been involved in a couple meetings with them discussing it, but we haven't gotten down into the details yet. But yeah, that is, as that moves along, that would be something that we'd want to include in our CIP.
What happened to the filtration project that was being looked at several years ago? I came out just to take a look at things about 5 or 6 years ago, and there was a project being looked at the time where they were going to put in a filtering system to clean up the algae and then use that water for irrigation.
I'm not aware of it. I've only been here about 2.5 years, so before my time.
It was at least 5 years ago.
Okay.
And there was a study done, I forget the firm that was involved, but they did a pilot study. They tried several different types of filtering systems.
Okay.
Anywhere from, and some of them had some merit, but they did a pretty extensive pilot program.
Okay.
To do that. So
I'll definitely look into it.
I know Wayne was here at that time, so it's been many years ago. So, but there should be a study somewhere that should be good, useful information.
Yep.
Even if it didn't march forward. I think there was some funding issues at the time.
Okay.
But that report should be available.
So this project would treat the water to a higher level to be able to be used for irrigation?
For irrigation purposes, yeah, there's a certain amount of suspended solids and BOD that's allowed. And that's really all you have to do is meet total suspended solids, BOD criteria, and pH. And there's really no nutrient issues at all. And it's pretty good, pretty easy to do. Water is usually only 30 milligrams per liter, which the lagoon system alone probably is already there. BOD wise, it's just the solids in the summertime that become an issue.
Okay. So what I did want to add is our ARPA funds, the rescue plan dollars, will be able to be used for infrastructure. So any costs associated with this could be used with those funds as well, which is, we've received approximately $11 million so far, and we'll receive the next installment of that next year. So.
And part of the project, of course, is to get that water from the wastewater plant back up to where it's needed, so.
Right.
Yep.
I mean, that same water was used for odor dust control.
Dust control, yep.
And if that had to meet the same criteria, and I don't think the state would, they might have made differences, but I suspect that the same numbers were there, so.
Okay. Yep, I'll definitely look into it.
All right, any other questions before we move on to item 3? All right, discussion then about the reporting of allocation and funding multi-year capital improvement projects. I believe we've touched on this in the discussions we've already had. The fact that we budget for projects, it seems that we have a large amount of money there. You know, how can we more evenly spread this money over a period of time so that we have a better idea of how much we have? Because one of the main issues for me is each year we should be getting money that flows into our capital improvement fund. So to identify how much that is, and then realize that I think the number is about $6 million a year, that if we budget a project and that project is not completed for 4 years, that's $24 million that has flowed into the capital improvement budget. So how can we better express these projects? You know, can we do them in phases? Can we say, for instance, some of the things that have been suggested earlier, the purchase of materials prior to the start of the actual project? But again, we already seem to be back in a situation where we're showing this $20 million, but we're only spending, I think it was, we're showing $8.5 million in encumbrances, and we just seem to roll this forward. Mr. Littrell, I know you had said you had some thoughts about maybe how these projects could be better expressed.
Yeah, it's going to come down to hiring consultants, and as council knows, I'm not sure if the committee knows, our engineering department did an extensive request for qualifications for all different types of engineering firms, contract management. So we did have an approved list that we could hire these companies. And so we've started selecting some of these consultants for doing reports and analysis, which some of those on the utility side needs to happen before we can start doing some of the design. But as quickly as we can, we need to start hiring these companies so we can move these projects along at a quicker pace.
Well, again, I think the pace is one thing, but you know, when we estimate a project to be done and we place it in one fiscal year, but the reality is it's not going to be able to be completed in 1 year, we get this appearance of surpluses building up that really aren't there.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something that we're working on like the biggest issue is when you look at the ongoing for electrical, with the 18 projects in there. As we finish up those projects, we need to quit adding them as quickly as we're putting them in. Otherwise, it's going to stay at 18 forever. I don't think we'll ever run out of projects, but hopefully someday. But as we're prioritizing these projects, we can add, say, one major project for next year, but then be able to complete a couple of them, so that list gets smaller and smaller. Like you're saying, Mayor, if we add a project for next fiscal year and in the back of our minds don't think that we're ever going to get to it, then we probably shouldn't be adding that project. If it does come down to it and it's an emergency, I can always come back to council and ask them, hey, we got more projects done than we thought, can we add this one? And we can add a project in the middle of the year if we have the available funding, so.
And again, I think, you know, the problem for me, when I look at these and as we're asked to vote on them is, you know, if that money's not gonna be spent, and I know that there's going to be new funding coming in subsequent years, then we just start, in my view, we're asking our ratepayers to pay more than they need to pay. And that's my real concern, is that we don't do that. We don't, you know, we have an expectation of how much money is going to come in each year and how much we're realistically able to spend each year, so that we don't keep rates at a level that a surplus just grows and grows.
Yep.
Any comments, Councilmember Bridges?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting discussion. Some of this appears to be perception. Some of this is, we have a $20 million budget, and it seems to have been that we had a $20 million budget last year, and only X number of projects got done. You know, and I guess part of my thought is some sort of graphic reporting. I mean, it's one thing to hide, in a way, a project that you know it's going to have to get done, but let's not put it on here, or let's put it in 2024 and then we'll bring it back. To me, there's something not legitimate about that. I mean, I'd rather personally see everything that absolutely is going to be done, or at least attempted to be done now, and what needs to be done in 2024. Rather than push something off and say, we may or may not get to it, but if we have that $4 million project and it really needs to get done, we'll just get permission. Even though we kind of know that money's there, but when somebody out in the community says, hey, okay, now it's not 20 anymore, now it's 16. But let's just not show that one. I'm almost wondering if there's a way to graphically represent this, to show that we're not over collecting. We're budgeting. I mean, we may have the cash on hand, but that's a whole different story. We're budgeting, you know, and to say we're going to smooth out this budget, but that doesn't mean we don't have, you know, we could show $6 million a year. But right now, we do have $20 million on the books. And in terms of available budget minus, budget minus encumbrances, we have just shy of 12 million. And the anticipation, if we had all the linemen we needed and we had all the equipment we needed, we could get that done this year, but we don't know. There's a lot of questions in there. No? Okay, I'm just saying that my concern is pushing something off the list and saying, we want to smooth this out, and then say, well, but if it's something that comes up later and we kind of know there's that yellow sticky down there, that we know there's that $4 million project coming up, and when we're ready for it, we'll just bring it back and get permission. So somewhere in there it has to be the reality of we have a budget for this year, but we're not going to spend it all because we can't get to it. I'm sorry.
The biggest thing that you have to do is the sequence of events. A capital infrastructure program is a wish and desire of what needs to be done. If you have no designers and no engineers, it stops right there. But the money has to be available to hire them, if we can get one or two or three. The next thing happens is once he's done designing and engineering, we have to buy material. If you have zero material, you stand in line just like at Home Depot or Lowe's, like anybody else, and you wait your turn. If they're out of stock, you don't get it. There are people here that are very qualified in doing CIPs and doing infrastructures, and it's a game of Tetris. Okay, this has to go before this has to go before this has to evolve before this. If you've got no design and no material, I don't care if you've got 100 linemen on the standby, you can't feed them material. The material has to be first on site, ready to go before you're looking for the personnel to install it. And then there has to be a design. No design, no material, no project. That's all it is. It's plain and simple. It's just like a home improvement, smaller scale. So that's what the big problem is. And that's what the committee's been fighting with. We make recommendations, and we went through the CIP back in June or July with the city. I did personally, and then to see it printed out and spit out at the last meeting I was at, I go, where'd all the level? I had this thing all leveled out. That's what got me, is I'm going, I had it leveled out. We had a meeting, everybody agreed to it. It looked really good on paper, and all of a sudden the 5-year capital plan comes out, and it's like, what just happened? 2026, I had stuff in there. It's not in any CIP right now. I had stuff in the budget for electrical, water, and sewer.
Councilmember Bridges, to touch on the comment of pushing a project off, it's always been my philosophy, if I feel that there's a valid chance that a project's going to be able to at least get started, I'm going to put it on the list. I'm going to have either the city manager or city council tell me no because we don't have the available funds. Of course, I'm going to do the research beforehand, but if I think I can get to a project, I'm going to put it on there. I'm going to ask to have that project on the list. It's not that I'm just going to push it off. It's if I don't think that because of the ongoing list we have and it doesn't fit into that puzzle at that point, or the Tetris or whatever analogy we want to use, if I don't think we're going to be able to get to it because of that, then yeah, I'll push it out a year. Does that make sense? Okay.
Councilmember Jorgensen?
I mean, I would think the first step in the process would be actually getting funding so that you can start the process. And so that's where we end up, right? We have the funding sitting in there in all of these processes. How many of these would you say are stalled at the beginning because we don't have someone to design or?
Most of those feeder projects are stalled at design. The feeder 53 was the most critical one right now. We're just finished the design in-house with that. And then he's going to jump to feeder 63. He might have actually started it since the last time I talked to him. But that is the next project in line for him to start designing. And then after that, I believe it was 64 comes right after that. We need to do the project, and those are projects that we could probably be doing at the same time if we were able to get the design complete.
So that budget that we see in there, that monies that we see in there, it's associated with each one of these projects. So the problem isn't that we don't have the funds for it. The problem is that we're stuck in the process. Mm-hmm. So I think, if we're going to talk about this, I personally don't think that funds sitting in there is the problem per se. It's getting these processes done so those funds don't sit in there for multiple years as we're waiting for this. I understood what you said, Mayor, about maybe the need isn't as pressing as to go outside, but maybe it is a little pressing if we're sitting year after year stalled on projects and we're not going anywhere.
Yep.
I mean, then maybe it is a little more pressing than just, are we in an emergency? Or are these really necessary then, is what you have to ask yourself, probably. And if they're really necessary, then let's do what it takes to get them started so that we can move, like he said, to step B, which is now we need to order things. I hesitate to use the money willy-nilly and say, I'm going to order 25 things before I've had someone come in and design the whole project for me, and I find out I need 28 or 22. So I just think what we're talking about here is, yes, it looks like we have money sitting on the books, but that money is allocated. But now we need to get those allocated projects done.
Mm.
And just by way of clarification, from what my thoughts are on this, there's two things involved. One is this future income. And without knowing specifically how much new revenue comes in every year, we just are unable to budget. If we say we need $20 million this year and $15 million next year, how much new money is coming in each year to pay for that? Because if all we're doing is rolling over reserves, then in my opinion, we're doing a disservice to the ratepayers. So there's that factor, but there's also the factor that the CIP list has not been put together in such a way to know what we actually can spend in a year. Whether it's design, whether it's materials, whatever it is, a project gets identified and says, you know, we're going to spend whatever it is, $9.5 million on this project, but we only spend $2 million. And then we're going to get some future revenue that comes in the next year. So now we've got this budgeted amount out there that's sitting in the bank, plus we've added to that with new revenue. So what I'm getting at is not delaying projects, not doing any of that, but to say, how much are we actually going to spend in a given year? And if a project needs to be multi-year, then find a way to say, project, you know, X86 is going to get this much money in this year, and it's going to get that much money in next year. And that way, if we can ever find out how much new money comes in each year, we'll have a much better idea of where we need to be charging our ratepayers, rather than just saying we're planning on spending $20 million. Yeah, we didn't spend that. We only spent $8.5 million, but we're basing our rates on this income level that we don't need. So I think that we need to be very careful about saying, well, we'll just budget a project. Whenever it gets done, it gets done. We keep charging a rate that assumes that we need the rate to be at that level when we never actually spend that money. Councilmember Bridges?
Yeah, and the thing that concerns me about all of this, as our city manager said, we are a pay-go community. We don't go out and take out debt because all of a sudden we have a $12 million capital improvement project that has to get done. That we may have, you know, I'm sure if we look back over a history of the 5 years past and going forward, say we do end up at $6 million a year. That our capital improvement average, but this year might be 8 million, but next year might be 12, and then we get this great deal on 6 transformers, and suddenly we're paying, you know, $9 million for transformers. That it still go back to some sort of revenue and expense smoothing that says, yeah, we pay this over time, but we also have to have our savings account. We also have to have that which we can have the cash for when we do decide to go out and buy the hardware or hire the consultant. So I think somewhere between the actual cost of per year and say, we have to have a savings account for these projects. These are big infrastructure projects.
Mm-hmm.
So
and I think we
sure.
should, I think that's a valid point, but we should realize that within these funds, we already have reserves. We have a rate stabilization fund. We have a number of reserves that are now fully funded. So we have a lot of money there, and whether we spend it quickly or not quickly, we need to look at what we're asking people to pay. Councilmember Adams?
Thank you. I think, you know, what it sounds like to me, what I'm hearing is more of an issue of how it's being reported, you know, and how, you know, we as a council or the utility advisory committee can see it so that it's more easily, you know, digestible to kind of figure out in your head. It's kind of like, you know, it feels like right now we're in the situation where, you know, you're going to a grocery store and you've got your budget in your head of how much you're willing to spend and you're kind of pricing it out as you put the items in, but then you have a situation where you're asking other people to come in and kind of to look over that, and they have no idea how much has kind of, you know, off the top of their head has come in and come out. And, you know, I think it makes sense for those obviously in finance and accounting, how it's all being reported, because there's ways in which it has to be done for their end. But I think for our end, I think maybe what's happening here is that it's just not easily consumable on our end on how it's being reported, so that we can better see how these things are laying out. I think maybe that's the best way to maybe address some of the problem that's going on. So that, and then also that means for the public's sake is if they can better get an idea of what these funds really look like, and then, you know, get that together. That to me seems to be a solution towards that.
Chair Carr?
I've got a couple issues, and I think one of the things, though, to get where you're at, Greg Todd put together, he and George Reed put together a report last year for the council, and that listed, okay, you know, here's the, just, we were trying, and that's one thing we got to get at, they were trying to make it into a shorter report, so it's like easy to digest. But at the same time, there might not be enough information to try to get a full understanding. But what they did is they put in, okay, here's the project, here's what it's doing, this project has to be done before this one does. So a key issue that we're talking now, and that we've talked earlier, and Carol has helped us with putting another document together, is priorities. I think that's one of your key issues right there. So that's the puzzle. It's a puzzle. It's not really, it's not hiding anything, I don't think, and it's not necessarily a perception, so I'm not being derogatory at all. But I think it is the puzzle, and that's why everybody's trying to Tetris and all that. It's the big issue there. So what are priorities? So we're looking at like priorities 1 through 4. So what I think I understand, like with Keegan and stuff, is if we get to and we end up with a 3 and 4, and we're looking at 18 projects, realistically, can we push 3 and 4 out? We just can't get to them. So it's not a matter of we're hiding anything or anything like that. It's just a matter of trying to say what's realistic. But then again, for some miracle, you get everything falls together, and then we're getting to it. So 3 and 4 then comes up. Then that's when you bring it back and say what's going on. The other thing you've got to understand, and I'm trying to understand it better too, is the budget and cash. Mm-hmm. So in 2012, there was a study for the electrical system, and that study then was used in the 2016 rate consultant, and a certain rate was suggested. And a lot of the rate process that the mayor's talking about is saying, okay, they wanted to populate the reserves, and they wanted to get more money for the capital. But Boulder City doesn't say, I've got a capital program or a capital project, specific capital project, and I'm gonna collect for that. They collect revenues based on a certain aspect. So you have a budget, but you don't necessarily have cash with it. And that's what the mayor's talking about, is we're rolling over some of this because we're collecting for it, but we're not collecting for a specific project. And that was another thing, something to look at possibly, is if we can actually get some of the money that's been encumbered and put that into a reserve, then you can understand what we need for cash, so what we actually are working with, and what cash we have. So then let's say, for instance, I can't remember, Marty, what are we at, $17 million with electrical? Cash, I think it's available cash. Yeah. So let's say you've got 10 million of encumbered, then you've only really got 7 million of cash, and you got 10 million of encumbered. And so it'd be nice to sort of get that understood. So I think that's one thing so that's what we'd like to do as a committee to help you, and before it's voted on, is give you more understanding. We'd like to get a little more understanding of some of the descriptions, but getting that priority and how it fits together and what is feasible. Does that make any more sense? And then the last thing, so if you look at the sheets, can I talk about the funds very quick? Because we're talking about, if we go back to the sheet, since the agenda items on the funding, the one thing I just want to point out is that if you look at the sheets, it says revision 3, so electrical is one of the ones. And you look down and you see the legend, and then you see SIP designations. You got SIP 1 through 4, voter approved. And so one thing we need to get a better understanding is that stops in 2023. So next year is the last time we have that. So whether we have to get another ballot question or not, there's something I just want to make sure that everybody's aware of. So we need to figure out what of the capital programs are available to us, the funding, or what do we have to get voter approval on. But we don't have that after 23, so we might need to be sooner than later that we need to redo that. So I just want to make sure that gets up there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments regarding how we may do something like this, or if it's necessary, or... All right, we'll move on to item number 4, discussion of financial data for the utility fund. Again, this item, Chair Carr and I have talked about, what information does the committee need, in what format, to be able to do the evaluations that are required either for rates or projects or whatever it might be. What information does the committee feel that it's missing right now with regard to financial data? Chair Carr?
I guess I was gonna let Eileen or Marty, if they don't mind, I don't mean to put them on the spot, but they're actually, that's one of their big backgrounds, and trying to get an understanding of it. I can take a shot at it, but okay, it looks like they want. So one of the things we're trying to do, I think, is when we're looking at the financial data, it's good to get it we need to get more of the history. Part of the problem with the history is that I think it's confusing. I'm not sure either when exactly we split the utilities out, whether it was 18 or 19. So, but beforehand, it was, I don't know if everybody understands, but the utilities were under the Public Works. So now, and they sort of, it was just basically the funds were out of the whole enterprise fund. And so they decided that, and I'm not even sure if, I'll just quickly say, and if I overstep my boundaries, then please let me know. But what I'm trying to understand is that, so then make sure that electrical pays for electrical, water pays for water, and et cetera, et cetera. And before 2017, that was not done. So my understanding, between 2017 and 2019, that information was being separated out. So if we understand the actuals, and that's what you need in a rate process, which is later, but you want to understand the actuals, and having several years of actuals, then you can sort of flow through and see what we actually did. So what are we budgeting? Is that realistic or not? Does it seem right? So by understanding the audited end of the year information, so that helps us understand what was actually happened. So you've got, if I understand correctly, the audited information happens around November, December is when that comes out. And then the audit report that is publicized is a very high level. So it says, it just gives the revenue breakdown for each one, but it combines the expenses for all the for most of the utilities. It's very confusing, so you can't get it out. So the city has it, and we usually can get it sometime during the year, but it's not always there. So I think if we flow through the year, you'd have the end of the year, the fiscal year, the next fiscal year, a 5-year plan, and then start reviewing the rate process. So that's getting that data, I believe, would go a long ways to get a better understanding of what we need. Did I miss anything, Marty or Eileen?
Well, I think for me, the city manager's report that the finance puts together shows some detail of revenues and expenses. But as you mentioned, the Hinton-Burdick reports that come out after the audit, they show the revenues by the individual departments, but they don't show the expenses individually. And so the city manager's report that the finance department puts out, the format of that is good. And I've been emailing back and forth with the finance department in the last several days, and I think that some of the software, the reports that they have now in both Munis and in Scrata, I think it's Scrata, that there's more information that's out there now that's available, but there's not any real summaries. And I think that, I don't know if they can look at the software to see if the information that's in Munis and Scrata can be summarized into the format of the city manager's report. And because from discussions that I've had before, it almost sounds like the city manager's report is an Excel spreadsheet that they take information from different places to put in. Well, I think it would behoove the city, even if they have to pay for software modifications, to be able to get summary reports using the software that they have.
So yeah, the Munis software itself, it's a full enterprise solution for the cities, really all of our operations, but the whole financial side of it, with it being governmental fund accounting, it doesn't do summaries like that. There is no functionality for that. We could get a standalone product that would interface with it to do some graphics and more overviews and backgrounds, but it would be an additional thing that we would need to do. And then the Socrata piece of it, that's the public-facing piece where you can go on our website and actually look, hey, we spent this much money from this vendor and at X date.
Right, it's got the detail, but I mean, it would take me hours to put those numbers together into a format that, like the city manager's report, where it shows revenues and expenses by department.
Right. And so we are looking at using some of the rescue plan dollars for software.
Good.
So that could be a possibility, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I'm aware of several vendors that do some items like you're describing. And I did want to add that yeah, the finance department does produce this from the numbers in Munis on their own, and it's a wonderful report. Takes a lot of time to do. It does show both the cash on hand and the reserve for each individual utility fund, and just for transparency, we do have the council approved 20% reserve target for every fund, for the funds.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I mean, it shows how much of the cash that's in the utilities is actually available. Mm-hmm. I think that the reports are good, but from trying to follow with the finance people, it doesn't sound like they have a software package that works with the software that we do have to do summary reports.
Right, and I could probably see what it can do and see if it's close to what you're looking for.
Yeah, again, the formatting that's in their monthly report to you is good. I mean, it shows the budget in year to date, but it does show revenues and expenses by department, which, I think that we should all be looking at to see where we're spending the money and how much money is, how much funds that we do have. The information is there. I just question, in the past, there have been some discrepancies from report to report. And like I said, I'm not sure of this, but it seems like they're doing it in Excel and manually putting the numbers in. And I think if they were doing it with a software package that worked with what they have, it would be easier for them and you would have less discrepancies.
Sure. It does export from Excel from Munis.
Yeah.
But they do format it. Yeah.
Okay.
Member Wilkinson, anything you'd like to add? I know you had forwarded an email several months ago with some suggestions. I'm not sure if those were fulfilled or not.
I'm sorry, it's been so long, I've forgotten.
It has been several months.
Yeah, Marty has pretty much expressed my concerns when it's hard to get different reports to agree. And so when one report says one thing and another one says something else, it's hard to follow the money. And if we had a program that did automatically create that monthly report, then we would have fewer errors.
I know one thing that has been brought up several times in the past regarding financial data is the administrative costs that are being charged to the utility fund. Some sort of documentation of what that is and why we see, especially this past year, I believe, we saw a significant increase in that administrative cost to the utility fund, transferring revenue back to the general fund.
One of the things, you know, that I see in these reports too, is they just show something like transfers in and transfers out. Well, that, if you want to look at where you're spending your money, then that doesn't necessarily help you to decide, well, maybe we shouldn't be spending this much money for this or for that, if it's just simply there's not enough detail. Yeah, for instance, you know, I'm looking at the June 30 year-to-date for fiscal year 21, and the budget, you know, it shows a budgeted transfer and year-to-date transfer of $2,725,000, but, you know, you'd have to go back to some of it is between the admin for the utilities and the individual utilities, but I think if it had more detail, it would be easier to follow.
Any other questions or comments? Chair Carr?
Yeah, I think right now, it's a matter of, is it up to the committee to try to get a yearly report and try to track it, or does the city have the capability to do it? So maybe I'm repeating the same thing, but what I'm seeing with the city manager report and some of the other ones, we can't fully track a yearly amount easily. So I created my own spreadsheet that took the city manager report, put it into an Excel spreadsheet and tracked it. So just using the city data and tracking it. So and then Marty brought up some of the issues that come about from that. But there is a quarterly report, but where I'm not sure, we just got some new information about how the quarterly report is used. I guess it's more of a report for the state. And I think that's some of my confusion, is trying to understand the reports that the city needs and the reports that would help us. So there seems to be a little bit of a communication, more on my part, and I'll take full responsibility. But I'm trying to understand what the city needs and what might be something that we can understand more. But that's what I'm sort of seeing is, well, we do this report for this purpose, we do this report for this purpose, but it's hard to follow, and it doesn't track for some of the information we need. So I think so overall for this discussion, that's one thing we're trying to figure out is it something that we need to do, or is it something the city can do, or is something with new software that might be able to be done? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Are you looking for like yearly actuals, like the exact, like every line item, the actual that was budgeted and spent in that year, or?
Actually, yes, because you're trying to figure out. So you budgeted and then you spent. So how'd your actuals compare?
Yeah, and we can run those reports definitely. It might not be presented in the way that's most easily digestible. So that's where a software would probably come in being useful. But I can work with you to, give you whatever reports that we can produce directly from Munis, and they also have ability to create custom reports that, of course, we'd have to pay to have built, but it's a possibility.
Again, we're just trying to work with it. We don't want excess expense or excess work if it's not something that's not really going to be all that beneficial. But actually, like I said, the quarterly report that looks like is what is given to the state has the breakout. One of the key issues is that, you get the breakout for the energy and the water, so those are nice numbers to have. You got breakout for the salaries, you got breakout for the professionals. So it actually is, in that quarterly report, it's reasonable. And if you could get it, actually maybe just even an Excel aspect, then you can sort of, if you need to make summaries, you can do the summaries on your own.
Sure. Yeah, we can see what you think of the reports that exist and go from there.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? And I do want to point out, I know Carol Ellis is here. This is vastly better than what we had in the past. So I do want to recognize that there's been substantial progress made on this. Again, I think it's a matter of just people getting together and agreeing on what they want to see. I think the finance department has done their best to do that. We just need to have better communication from the committee to the finance department as far as formats and that type of thing. And again, because these are a monthly report that's being produced, we see problems where over the year, the numbers don't add up, and that could be month-end adjustments or whatever might be happening between the months. But it's difficult to see if you're taking the numbers from every report and plugging it into a spreadsheet. When you get to the end of the 12 months, they don't add up.
I just have a question. So is all this information that you want simply for transparency, or is it to get to the bottom of something, a process that, maybe how utilities are funded? I mean, I guess that's my question, right? Is why all this information so specific?
I think it's all the above, because, well, part of what, like I said, when I worked with Bureau of Reclamation, I was on the opposite side. I was dealing with the Boulder Canyon project, and we had an engineering and operating committee. We also had a 10-year plan. It's dealing with Boulder Canyon, Hoover Dam. So in that case, it was the obligation of Western and Reclamation to let the customers understand what was needed. So your capital, your funds, and so I guess your actuals, your revenue. So then when you did a rate process, everybody understood what was needed. And so I guess the quick answer is most of this is needed, if not all of it, to get a better understanding of what the rate is needed. What we need, and I guess that's the next agenda item, but I think a lot of it is that. But it's just tracking what cost and what is budgeted and what's cost is a big thing too. But it is a big part of the budget. I mean, big part of the rate review.
Any other questions or comments on the financial data?
Well, I just would add that, we've talked a couple of times about the rate study, and we paid a good bit of money last year to have Raftillis do a rate study, and they gave us, what I understand, they gave the city software that we can now put numbers in going forward to predict to expect what the rates should be. And we need that information to put into that rate study to say, okay, if you have history over the last several years, and you can then try to predict what's going to happen going forward. So then, and we look at some of these reports and we say, okay, well, last year we had $5 million more revenue than expenses. It makes me think that we could reduce rates. But we need some of that detailed information to go into that rate study to predict the rates going forward.
Okay, anyone else? Councilmember Bridges?
Yeah, a little bit more information on that software. Does that also include budgeting for capital improvement? Or is it just cost of service? Is it?
Everything that you would say your expenses are going to be going forward. So it would be capital projects and maintenance and the whole thing.
And cost of goods and
cost of your utilities.
Cost of your
yes,
utilities.
Exactly.
So we do, in a sense, have what we need to present that data.
I think the information is there, but it's just, can you summarize it? I mean, I don't know. You don't want to have to put in all your vendors and what you paid those vendors last year to come up with expenses. There should be some summary way that you can do that.
I just want to clarify what it really wasn't software. It was 55 different. It was a workbook with 55 different spreadsheets. And so you have to understand how the spreadsheets work. And they do have it all boiled into with nice graphs and everything like that, but you have to be able to go to the spreadsheets and fill the spreadsheets in and stuff like that. So it's not something that they could possibly export the data from Munis, most likely, and then import it, but it's not an easy process.
Yeah, because Larry, you're talking about how the Raft-Tillis report is put together to predict what your rates are going to be.
Correct. So they did have everything. They have capital. They have everything. They have the assets. So it's all there. It's a big spreadsheet, and it's a lot of sheets, a lot of data. So you've got to understand it and get to it. So Josh gets the fun job of working with that, and so we don't want to burden him with a lot of things either. So, but it's not really simple.
And finance has sent that to me, and we've kind of gone over it. They do have all of the data needed to put in it, and they have done that, I believe. So they do have an understanding of how to use it. It sounds like to me the overarching issue is telling the story in a digestible way. So I think that's accomplishable, and we'll be able to figure that out for you.
Anyone else? All right, we will move on to item number 5, which again, for myself, that's the question, is what do we charge our ratepayers? We've already had a lot of discussion about that, but I think getting this Raft-Tillis formula, if that's what it is, we've paid good money for it, to look at a 1, 3, and 5 year plan as far as where the rates are, where we expect to be, projects that need to be done, expected increases in all types of costs, but not being in a situation where at the end of every year we're trying to figure out the immediate need for the following year, but to be able to say over a period of time, since 2 years ago, I had put forward the repeal of an automatic rate increase. And then we were able to also do an overall decrease. That's more than 10%. If you add those numbers up, that's more than 10% of rates that our ratepayers have not had to pay. And the appearance is we still have a significant surplus in our utility fund. So, I still don't think we're where we need to be in an understanding of what we're charging for our rates, and still have ample money, have millions of dollars that are uncommitted for projects that may not be foreseeable right now. We have a lot of money sitting in this utility fund, and is that money that's better sitting in the utility fund or better sitting in our residents' pockets? So again, anyone wanting to provide any thoughts on the rate process that we might look at?
So I'll speak up again. So right now, I just want to remind everybody that Boulder City owns and operates all of the utilities. And since it's a municipality, it's at cost. There is no profit involved in it. So that's the thing you want to keep an eye on the rate, so you're trying to keep it at cost instead of allowing it to just build. So you're collecting more money than you need. The other thing now, we've got to, in the future, we have issues that we have to consider conservation. And water, I think right now is more of an issue, but with Hoover, if the Lake Mead continues to go down and we lose a lot more of Hoover power, conservation for electric might be more of an issue too. But I guess an example that I would like to be able to talk about, so I think we're under I'll bring it up because I think it's saying the rate review process is we have the tier of the rates. One thing that I'd like to be able to discuss in this year is that the first tier or two have at cost. And so that way the people on a fixed income are paying for what they need. So for instance, you've got your first 8,000 gallons of water. If that's deemed that's pretty much what a household needs, and then you got to figure out what size families and stuff like that. So is that have it at cost? Right now it is not at cost. It's at the water itself is at a higher rate than it is cost. So you could possibly adjust some of the rate tiers to look at this is at cost, and then these other ones are going to be a conservation issue. So that's something that I think would be nice to look at in the future.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Bridges?
All right, I'm also curious, in terms of modeling for the future, and I mean, this could be a long time off, but are we looking at some point, we might not be able to depend on Hoover Dam. Are we looking at some point, we're getting a 10% cut in supply of water and an increase, what, a 4.5% in cost of water?
That sounds right.
Huh?
That sounds right.
Yeah, and I think that's annually. So there are issues out there that we have no control over. I mean, we have control over capital projects, we have control over what we charge, but there are future possibilities of issues. I mean, I think the water situation is just going to keep getting worse and worse, and at some point we might reach dead pool. But so at how long out do we look at including those, or do we include those now? You know, the probability of X in those future costs.
If I can, well, the one aspect is we do have, I think it was mentioned earlier, you have $3 million in rate stabilization that can be used for water or energy. So that theoretically should buy us a couple years, depending on how bad it gets. So if it hits us faster than we would think, then that would be one of your buffers. But the IRP should be another thing to try to, so we need to look at our resources. So I'm not sure I can go on that aspect here, but that's some of the things. So we have discussed it in the committee, and we need to continue to discuss it. So by looking at the rate process and looking at the conservations, looking at the resources, then all that hopefully will come up. And that's how we've got to figure out how to keep our goals in parallel. So we keep looking at that instead of saying, okay, we're looking at one, and then we missed it. So we got to run parallel and keep all these things going forward. So that's when sometimes our meetings get a little chaotic or long, because they're trying to keep the information flowing. But that's a lot of times too, that's what some of the information we're asking for, is so we can get that understanding.
I know that I was listening last night to the Planning Commission. They were discussing the solar out there, and that we had written in that we were maybe wanting to purchase on this next project coming up a percentage or a 5, help me out here with the wording,
Megawatts.
Megawatts, okay. I just don't want to say it wrong and say kilowatts. So how would that affect our rates in the future? Because that's something to consider, right?
Go right ahead.
As a former utility installer for 250 megawatt solar farms, right now, even if our electricity went up 5 cents a kilowatt, we still couldn't beat that price at 5 cents additional kilowatt to buy solar. What you do is, we're part of the Silver State Consortium, and they're constantly looking for surplus electricity. If they can get the surplus electricity into the system, then they can curtail the generators at Hoover. Hoover is not just generation. Hoover is a load on the system, the whole Southwest system, to spin air inside those turbines to act as a load bank on the whole system so it doesn't go crazy. So we're just looking at the aspect of it being generation. No, it's not. It's a condenser. It actually sits there and gets on the lines and adds a burden on the lines to where the voltage doesn't spike up so high that we've got to shut off. So we're tied into Silver State for buying spot market price power. Right now in the afternoon, if you can believe it or not, solar is being dumped on the market. There's companies paying you to take the solar because they don't have enough consumers to buy it because of all the rooftop solar. So then you've got a problem with the rooftop solar, part of the rate study, so I can tie this back in to our attorney. Part of the rate study is looking at the solar, that if you got so much solar on a roof in your residences that you can't afford a power swing from generation within the city limits to buying power to supply the citizens of Boulder City. That is another very touchy subject that we will get into on item 6, but that's something that I'm pushing and I'm an advocate for. Let's go look and see what's there on the open market and get it as cheap as we can. But we're going to have to take, and I hate to say it, and I'll say this myself as a person who's an electrical expert, that we are going to have to put a cap on solar in Boulder City because it's going to jack our system up so bad that we're going to go dark. Because all of a sudden the cloud comes over, we have different problems that happen, and all of a sudden there'll be no electricity in Boulder City. Because we're not a consumer of it, we're a provider, we're generation. And one of the models that I've been studying very hard is Hawaii. Hawaii's all combustion engine generation. They put so much solar up there that when all of a sudden the cloud would come over, a little bit of rain, all of a sudden the power flow would switch the other direction and they couldn't catch up. So the whole area goes dark. You got to be careful. It's a really big balancing act. I mean, to me, it was amazing. You know, you were talking about 5 meg. Well, the one solar farm I was involved with was 250 meg. And to see that all of a sudden go offline because a cloud came over, it put everybody scrambling for electricity. So you become dependent on something and all of a sudden it goes away. Now you got a real big problem. And to buy electricity on the spot market, if you're really in a bind like everybody else will be, you're going to pay dearly for it. And that's what our rate stabilization reserve fund is for.
I don't believe we received much solar out of all that solar. I think we do have part of the power purchase agreement with SNWA and their current project, but none of the other solar is actually coming into Boulder City. The other thing is, I know that a number of those projects include battery storage, that they're developing more and safer and more condensed battery storage, and that a number of the projects that have been approved, several of them, have included that. So I think that addresses some of that issue of supply and demand.
Yeah, let's not get too far off of our discussion right now of the rate process. I believe that our last 2 solar projects, the one that's under construction and the one recently completed, the city has the ability to purchase power from either one of those. We're not required to do that. And on average, the price is less than what Silver State typically bills us. Does that sound right, Mr. Todd?
I would have to go back into the documents, but I know Silver State's been getting some really good rates on solar energy
As it comes down.
through their buying power. And the other thing is you can't track an electron through the system. Everything dumps into Mead Sub. We get our power out of Mead Sub. You cannot identify which is solar and which is commercial combustion.
Right. These companies are just committed to provide that power to us when it's necessary. Again, sticking to our current item for the utility rate review process, any other questions or comments regarding that?
My only comment would just be that, you know, as we move forward with this process and reviewing it, is that I definitely think we need to take into consideration when we talk about conservation, you know, prices should reflect almost the desire to conserve. And so when people hit higher points and you're using more and they're not conserving, you know, that I think that should be considered when we're looking at our rate process, so that those who are using the most are paying their fair share. I just think that's an important thing, so that it also then encourages people to reduce their use when they can.
And excellent point, and I think Chair Carr had referred to that. I believe we have 3 tiers within residential water and electric and commercial water and electric. We may very well need to look at those tiers and say, you know what, if you're a resident and you're using 40,000 gallons of water a month, which apparently we do have, you know, single-family residences that use that much, well, that's going to become very expensive for you if you want to maintain that level. So we probably should look at, what an average home is using. And if you're well above that amount, well, pricing may need to convince you to reduce that usage. And that applies for both water and electric, I think. But those are the people, those are the users putting the highest demand on our systems. So to say that we're punishing them, no, I don't believe that's the case. What we're saying is you're forcing other costs to go up for everyone because of the amounts that you're using. And we've got those tiers in place. I think it's just a matter of looking more at average usages and coming up with an appropriate cost within each tier. Any other questions or comments on rates?
Mayor, I'd like to, go ahead, Eileen.
One of our directives is to make, review the rates and make recommendations to the council. And I just want to clarify that that is why we get so far into the numbers, is that we're acting as a body sort of as an advisor to the council so that you don't have to go through all of those numbers. And so that's why we get into all the meat of what's going on, is so that we can make responsible recommendations to the council.
And I do appreciate that, because those numbers are daunting, so. Anyone else on rates?
Mayor,
All right.
I'll have a couple of comments.
Go ahead.
So what I was planning on doing is, as we're getting the CIP more finalized, of maybe running a couple scenarios with that Ref Telus rate study. One thing that, for lack of better words, scares me about the rate study is they have 3% inflation built in there for future years. The costs that we're seeing for construction projects and just construction management, consulting, is more than 3%. 5 is probably even on the low end. Marvis can speak to it more than I can, but for materials for electrical projects can be 10 to 20% more than what we're used to. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we might need to run a few different scenarios with that rate study showing, okay, this is what it would be if we did 5% or 7%. I don't know how high we'd want to go, but just to show, okay, this is best case scenario, this is worst case scenario, and then we can deliberate and try to find the best plan of attack for moving forward.
Excellent point, and I think that's why we need this yearly review. It's not necessarily that we're going to change the rates every year, but we need to look, is this 5 to 10% increases we're seeing right now, is that going to last for 1 year, 5 years, 10 years? We don't know, but yes, we have to be able to analyze it each year to see the direction that things are going.
Mm-hmm.
Chair Carr?
So the one thing at the beginning, and I think I can tie this into the rate study also, is that's the thing that we're trying to do, is we're trying to find the facts, to bring the facts to you. So if there's something we missed and you bring it to our attention to say, well, this is what you've seen or something like that, we're happy to go back and look at it. But a lot of this stuff, there's a lot of issues that the facts aren't clear. And that's what we're trying to do, is help you with that. So we have our background, but we also have to do the research to what's current. So we have our background from our aspect, mine being the government, so it's not exactly the city, the other one's municipality, but still not exactly Boulder City, but we can still bring it and bring our issues. So I think what I'm trying to clarify is we are trying to bring the most current information to you, not just our old history. And so that's just, I'll bring that up at the next I've got a little update on that, or a little bit of information on the solar, but in the next other one also. But yes, we want to look at, you have to look at the worst case scenario. You have to do that. So it's not a matter of saying, well, oops, it's a matter of, no, we need to see, okay, here's the best and here's the worst. So, and we might end up falling in the middle, so.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, we'll move on then to item number 6, discussion of renewable energy and water conservation projects. Again, we've hit on several of these already. The comment by Member Todd about solar, it certainly is a great idea that we're not putting additional pollution into the air. Boulder City's been a green community for a long time. If you count the hydro power we've always been able to get from Hoover, but that also may be some type of question. So, what can we do as a community to start looking forward? Because I believe there's legislation at the state level by 2030 we have to maintain our 50% reliance on renewable energy, which we're at that now with the hydropower, but where are we going to be by 2030? Projects?
I don't know where we're going to be at 2030, but no, I do agree with you. As it looks right now, we will be within that 50%. To touch on the renewable energy, Mr. Krantz, he is the Director of Energy at SNWA. The rooftop solar is what was brought up it's not an issue right today, but it's going to become an issue for our system. So he's going to dive deep into the rooftop solar, the energy that we get provided here in Boulder. And he's planning on giving a report to the Utility Advisory Committee yet this fall, and giving his professional opinion on, do we need to draw the line in the sand and say, okay, no more rooftop solar, or any other ideas that he may have, and then we'll be able to have that discussion at the UAC and then make a recommendation to council.
And I think along those lines, for many years, when people would look into rooftop solar here in Boulder City, and the companies would come out and they'd get a copy of the bill and they'd go, well, this won't work because our rates were so low, it didn't make sense to do rooftop solar. Well, we seem to be at least at a break-even point now, but there are other options rather than people putting solar on their roof. There are projects where the city could undertake that and have our residents invest in a particular project if they wish to do that. The city could build their own. My concern is what Member Todd has already brought up. We can't go messing around with large amounts of power within our distribution system and creating problems for Western Area Power that they can't, recover or assist us with. So there are a lot of alternatives out on the market right now about how those types of things might be done. I believe Member Jorgensen had mentioned the battery backup systems. There are a number of things like that it seems are going to be necessary and in the best interests of our ratepayers to take a very hard look at. Without being, I've heard a couple of pitches for battery backup systems, and it's like, yeah, we need to be very careful where we place those. I don't care how safe they say they are. Those are made out of very volatile chemicals. Again, I've heard a couple proposals of where those would like to be placed, and it's like, no, you're not putting that next to anybody's house, so.
Yeah, I've been involved in a couple meetings recently with battery storage, and some of the stipulations that have come up is additional training for our fire department, definitely the location, having a water source to them. They're putting a lot of stipulations on it, rightfully so, but yeah, it's a definite safety hazard.
Yeah, unfortunately, the technology level right now, that seems to be, if it catches fire, it's going to burn.
Yeah, so you just try to prevent the other ones from catching fire.
Right. Let's stay on electric right now, or solar. Any other thoughts, questions, comments from committee members or council members? Chair Carr?
Just to clarify, so the solar that we purchased, or actually the contract, and I think that contract, we still need to look at that contract closely, and I think that's one of the things that SNW, I mean, Silver State was gonna help us with too, showing us our resource, showing us our contracts and stuff. The contract's a little confusing. What we have is we've purchased, or they're allowing us to purchase 5 megawatts. It does not say how much energy. Energy is what you need. With solar, you have to have energy. It doesn't have, as Greg mentioned, Hoover capacity or the demand makes a big difference. The megawatts at Hoover is a big advantage to us. And in our Hoover A, we have that advantage. With solar, that's part of the problem with, especially let's say that you wanted to just take a piece of the solar and say, we're going to be a generator and we're going to have that for Boulder City. We have to have backup power for that. So that's where a lot of times it gets expensive. But that's what we're trying to, that's the facts we're still trying to understand too, so we can bring it and make it. So there's pieces to it, and you have to understand what it all's about. So with the one we get from the solar, actually they're selling us power. In the contract, it states that they will sell us 5 megawatts of any source they can get. So it's not necessarily from the solar plant. Actually, it's to our advantage, because then we don't have to have, like I said, we don't have to buy backup power for that. So that's, and it's I believe it's 39 cents a kilowatt hour or $39 a megawatt. So right now, that's not the cheapest power. In the future.
3.9, I think it's 3.95 cents.
Yes, yeah. Well, actually, no, that's not the proposal. That was what in the contract. And
That's the contract, and it's 24/7. This is a lot of energy.
well, no, that's the problem. It doesn't clarify 24/7. The contract doesn't. So anyway, I don't want to argue about that. But that's the thing. That's the fact we have to find out. And but I think that we're talking about is the price isn't necessarily fantastic, and so it gives us another resource. But then, since it's not solar and it depends where they get it, can we call it renewable or not? So that's another issue we have to do. So that contract, we have to look at that more closely. So if we get something with SNWA, which I believe is the next one we're trying to work with, then maybe we need to clarify that more, and that would be more renewable. Greg, sorry.
The thing that we're trying to understand, and we have to get council to understand, is what we get for electricity is not labeled as solar. It goes into Meade substation, and then it comes back out to us up Buchanan. There is no block of energy that says this is going to be solar, this is coal-fired, this is water, this is whatever. It's not like that. But the thing is, anytime you can get a contract written to where they're going to give you 5 megawatts, of whatever energy is being produced and guaranteed, then we don't have to scramble for backup. And that's what happens with solar. With rooftop solar, you have to supply the same kilowatts to the house as what you got in your solar system. So if it goes out or goes down, the customer has electricity. The biggest thing that's been drilled into my head over 40 years of working for a company like the city of Los Angeles or here is that we supply the electricity and the commodities to the customer irregardless of what the cost is, because that's what's in our contract. We're not like a private for-profit company that whereas if the system goes down, yep, you're SOL, figure it out on your own. No, we have to supply our citizens with electricity, water, and sewer as a municipality. So that's where we're getting into the problem with the rooftop solar. And the problem is when the rooftop solar people come out and see what the wholesale rate of electricity is for Boulder City to buy power, they can't match it with solar. They would love to be on the retail rate, but because they're a generator, we pay them the same money that a power producer, we pay them for electricity. And that's where the squawk is. So that's something we have to look at, and that's what the committee's looking at, is all these different pieces of the puzzle and trying to figure out what's a good product for us to get into to where when you sign a 5-year contract, you're not shooting yourself in the foot a year and a half down the road.
I know it's, obviously, as where we stand right now, we're at this 50% mark for renewable energies. But you know, even the rosiest projections that I've seen, you know, it's not a point of if, you know, we'll hit, you know, rock bottom at Lake Mead. It's that it's coming eventually down the line unless some new undetermined technology comes about or other type of you know, distribution, getting water there from somewhere else. But at some point, you know, we're not going to be generating power at the dam at some point if things continue the way that they're projected to go. So, you know, what happens in 2060, 2070, when, you know, like I said, the rosiest, they're saying, well, we need a new infusion of some type of new technology or something going in here. You know, at some point we also have to be planning for the future where, you know, if it's not, you know, so we're good for 2030, but come 2050, we're not meeting these renewable standards. We need to be looking forward in that direction as well. So obviously I don't know the answer, but I hope that we are taking those things into considerations, that we can't just sit on our laurels with Lake Mead and say, okay, we've met our you know, our quota.
I believe the IRP, so what, Ned helped me, the abbreviation, what's the abbreviation? Thank you. Right, so the resource plan is a 5-year projection. And so the last 5 years, Mead wasn't in that type of danger. So that's something that I believe, Keegan, that can be done with that, is that should be able to be part of that plan. Is there again maybe a worst case scenario? Here's the best. Here's the worst scenario. If it does go bad, where do we get it from? And that's what everybody else is saying. We have Silver State to help us out, and so hopefully there's enough resources. Because part of it is we have to be able to purchase it as renewables, and so it doesn't have to be solar or wind. That's the most popular, but maybe we'll get lucky and there's some other source out there that we can get to. But I think we can do it with the IRP.
You know, one thing that we have in our favor is our arrangement with the Colorado River Commission and SNWA, is they basically take care of that for us. You know, we have our Hoover, which is, I'm not sure what the number is now, probably, it used to be 20 megawatts, maybe a little bit less than that now after the new contracts. And then we got what they call the CRS Crisp, which comes out of Glen Canyon Dam. I think it's about 8.5 megawatts there. And there's various amounts of energy associated with that. From what I understand, this new contract that supposedly takes effect January 1st, 2022 with one of these solar installations here is for 5 megawatts. And I was told that's 24/7. And then SNWA is prepared to provide up to 3 megawatts of solar out of their purchases as well if we want to. So that basically we're pretty well covered with resources that we have available to us. The question is and down the road, what may happen to the Hoover? If Hoover does go to dead pool, we still have to pay for that. We have to pay for it because the dam has to be paid off, the improvements at the dam. So we still have obligations there, the same with Glen Canyon. So there are issues out there, but also CRC, or the Colorado River Commission, is working on that, and they supposedly have our backs for that type of thing, so we don't have to get too heavily into it. But it is nice to know that they are there and will be working for us. But there may be costs associated with some of the things down the road, and so there's just a lot of things we don't know. But right now we're in pretty good shape with resources as far as that goes. At least that's my understanding anyway at this point.
And I think, you know, one thing that absolutely needs to be said is our growth. You know, one reason we're in the position we're in is because of our conservative growth. And if we start growing rapidly, we will outstrip whatever power we may get from Hoover and the CRC. You know, growth comes with costs. There's no question about that. So again, we can look at these projects. There's all kinds of stuff out there that I've been hearing from different companies that they would like to do. You know, that was not a focus in the past with all of the other energy projects out there in El Dorado Valley. And certainly there's new technologies. You know, the battery technology is getting better. But what do we do for that? Any other questions or comments or recommendations with regard to renewable energy projects? I know at our last council meeting, Councilmember Adams had brought forth an item on the dark skies. You know, we do need to look at our government operations and see if we can conserve some of our power. I don't even know that we actually know how much power the city uses. I think there's probably quite a few street lights out there that aren't being metered, but those benefit all of us, so. All right, then let's talk about the water conservation efforts. And again, Mr. Littrell, you've mentioned, or we've talked about potential projects that SNWA may be interested in assisting us with.
Yeah, the main one is possibly upgrading the treatment plant so we can use the treated water for irrigation at either a golf course or a park. That in turn is less water that we got to draw out of the lake. Some more current or near future projects that we're looking at. Our landscape division is constantly doing water audits on how they can conserve water, different types of grasses to use, upgrading valving and irrigation systems. And then a bigger project that we're in the beginning stages of planning for is the turf removal. And 2026, we have to have all, I can't remember the technical term for it.
Non-functional.
Non-functional, yep. All non-functional turf removed, and they have stipulations with SNWA on how much plantings or desert landscaping we got to replace it with. There's a lot of different stipulations to go with that, but I'm already talking to SNWA about that. Working on a master plan of not only the Muni Golf Course, but then some of the boulevards and landscaping in front of city facilities. One big one that gets brought up a lot is the turf right out front here, or by PD, or even Parks and Rec. If it's only the landscape guys that are the ones walking on it, then that's non-functional. It's supposed to be removed. Only downfall with that is a lot of times when you're putting in the desert landscaping, it requires more maintenance. Our landscape crews are already going as quickly as they can to keep everything looking beautiful. It may require more staffing if we switch everything over to desert landscaping. Fortunately, SNWA says that in some areas we have enough of the mature trees that we won't have to do any planting, so we might get away with more of the decorative rock and stuff like that, so we won't have to have more maintenance items. But that's one of the bigger projects in addition to what SNWA was talking about with the treatment plant.
And again, I think too that the, you know, let's face it, our golf courses and our parks are enormous users of water, and that is non-recoverable water. In other words, it doesn't go down the sink drain into the sewage system where it might be treated and reused for other purposes. So, you know, we certainly love our parks here in Boulder City, and that needs to be among the very last things that we start to touch. But I believe SNWA is helping out with a study at the golf course, Muni Golf Course, to identify areas of turf that can be removed there. Certainly we have parking strips and all sorts of things around the city that we're going to have to take a hard look at.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Carr?
So I think on the some of the landscaping, I think we want to be a little careful in changing over. If we're, you know, if it's non-functioning turf, we don't have a choice. That's the law. But if it's an iffy aspect, because, you know, well, even by the Park Service or by the one aspect by the upper part of the police station, people use that grass to sit down, sort of take a break or something like that. So there is a little bit of use, but if you change all of that out and you're using rock, there's a potential to have hot zones. and so you're gonna change the temperatures. And so, I heard that there was looking at what the ABC Park to possibly do some, different aspects with the ABC to say, okay, here's some way we might change it. So you've got a lot of different the old cottages, but a lot of different areas there that you could say to do different type aspects, and then it would be able to see it. And that might be a good idea. I think it is to try to do some testing areas first and see what it does. You got to find out, Ned had brought up the point that if you take out too much of the grass, with probably like in here, we got all these big trees, you've got to make sure you've still got to be able to water their roots properly. And so if you just put decorative rock in there, that's probably not going to work, because you're not going to get, yeah. So those are the type of things that I just want to point out, that just, there's a point, especially if it does go down and we get in an emergency, we don't have a choice. But I'd say, can we ease into it first and then see what we got?
One thing that I've mentioned before, but I'm going back a little bit on the history of it. Back in, I think it was about 1980, when they passed this growth control ordinance that basically limited Boulder City's growth to pretty low levels. Part of the reason for that was to preserve two of our resources that were, and basically we were entitled with when the city was formed by the government, but that 80 million kilowatt hours of energy, and then also the water that was allocated to Boulder City. And I think that, I don't remember the exact numbers, but there's about 17,500 acre feet of water that the city has allocated to it every year, and I think we're using maybe 10 or 11,000. The water that we don't use goes to Las Vegas, and they use it. So they support their growth with water from Boulder City. And the thing we need to remember, if we curtail the sales of water, water is still is a revenue resource for Boulder City. And if we make it so that everybody dries up their lawns and aren't using water, the water that we're conserving here is going to go to Vegas, and they're going to use it down there. And we lose the revenue from that water. So we need to be careful, I think, if we're too aggressive with this, because it could end up biting us in the end.
And that's an excellent point, and applies to, as we talked about with the energy, if so many people go with rooftop solar, we still have to maintain our distribution systems, and there has to be a way to do that without putting the entire burden on those folks who don't do those things. Councilmember Adams?
I'll just say that my understanding is there's, a committee that's been put together to actually create what the guidelines will be for the definitions of non-functional turf, because as it is right now, I don't think that it's actually exactly defined as to what that will or won't be. But in my understanding is there also will be an appeal process in case they're, I think the saying was that I heard was, they're going to catch a few dolphins, with this non-functional turf thing, and to try and handle those as a case-by-case basis. But, by and large, we are going to be told what we have to do to meet the requirements of the law, and we'll have to do that. And if there's something that, we really feel isn't, we might have the opportunity to appeal that. But, at the end of the day, we're not, as a city, going to have a whole lot of determination in what the law says and what it doesn't at the state level. So I think that's something that's important to remember. But regardless, even desert landscaping, needs a little bit of water. It needs maintenance. But if all of these things are done right, you can absolutely live. You can have, we have a beautiful mulberry tree in the middle of rocks, in our yard. It's not that it's impossible to do. It's just about doing it right, so that you can conserve your water, conserve the use, and you actually have a much better, more sustainable, and I know the complaint is, it's harder to maintain because you can't just drive a lawnmower over it, but honestly, easier to maintain in the long run, because it requires that much less resources and that much less demand on it. So in the long run, it is the sustainable way to go. It just, how you do it is the most important part.
And rock isn't the only solution.
Absolutely.
It may be easy, but it's not the only solution. Councilmember Bridges?
Yeah, and I think, I don't know, it's all, I feel like I constantly bang that drum is recycling our wastewater. And I know we sell it, I know we're selling some of it to the gravel companies. But in terms of getting it back, using it for our You know, I know there's a lot of talk, using it for our golf courses, using it for our parks. There's no reason why we are the only municipality that doesn't have its wastewater go back into the river. And so I think the more we can continue this dialogue and look at the funding of it and make sure that we are, in effect, a closed-loop system. That the water that comes in is used for something, and none of it gets to just dry up in the desert. So that's it.
And again, I think that's what, I know that's an effort that I've made over the past several months, and still be able to maintain our ability to decide what does happen, rather than bringing in outside entities that say, well, we're going to help you when, you know, sometimes when you hear, I'm with the government, I'm here to help you, you might want to be careful. But anyone else? Member Todd?
We can conserve the water and by cleaning up our effluent to where we can use it on our lawns and parks. If we use it on our lawns and parks, we do not have to pump it back over the hill. We reduce the amount of consumption out of the lake. The problem I have with the whole thing is that if we give them more water back in the lake, they will build more homes. They've already stated they want more water for more homes. We have an annual allotment of acre-feet of water out of Lake Mead. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we are the second person to have water allotments out of the Colorado River. If we've already conserved our allotment to under 50% of what we're allowed to use, we've already conserved our water, okay? So what I'm saying is let's clean the water up in the influent, use it on our parks and use it on our other places, but do not send it back over the hill, because we're reducing the amount of water we're pulling out of the lake by using the effluent water cleaned up in our own town. And that accomplishes the same thing. And just so you understand, we just signed a new contract with the gravel quarry to use every bit of effluent water coming out of the plant. That is the hardest working water Boulder City has, or even Henderson has. Okay, and that's what I produce and recommend. And the water does not dry up in the desert. It goes into the aquifer of the El Dorado Valley.
Do we know how much they're paying for that? That would be nice to know.
Yeah, Mr. Brock Armentrout has those numbers.
That'd be good to know.
And they used so much water on the last solar project of effluent that they sucked it dry, and we had to give them potable water to make up for dust control. That is where we're not being efficient. If we can take the potable water, which is used on the Muni course and other places, and use untreated water on those courses, the city, who is responsible to pay the bill, is going to save 25% of their water bill per month. And also, they're counting potable water as water that they're looking to conserve. And so if you take 1 million gallons a day off the Muni course of potable water, you've already reached your conservation goals. And that's what I've been striving for the past 3 years. And we're still at a standstill on it. We're slowly studying it. But with the federal money that's coming in, that would be part of municipality utilities that can be, some of that money can be used to shift the water usage. Because if any more growth occurs, I don't care where they build houses in Boulder City, you're still going to use the potable water for water and whatever you got. If you can shift the non-potable water use to run that up a little bit and conserve your potable water, now you've got a win-win situation.
And I think it's going to be important that, you know, if some of these projects come to fruition in the next, say, 3 years, and we reduce our water usage significantly, we probably need to get some kind of an agreement from SNWA that if there is another 10% or whatever cut, that it is not applied to Boulder City. If we're able to reduce our usage by, 20%, 25%, if the levels continue to drop, we should not be the ones that keep paying the price when they're building, tens of thousands of homes in the valley. So I think that'll be an important factor to make sure we follow up on. Mr. Anala, you had a comment?
I think what what's being discussed as far as having the reuse water is a great thing. But just remember, we have to have a separate utility system to distribute that water. The wastewater treatment at the bottom of the hill, not at the top. You gotta bring all that water back up. You have to have water towers, you have to have reservoirs, you have to have infrastructure and staff to maintain that. And it's just as difficult to maintain in that as the water system is. And on top of that, now you have public perceptions if you wanna use it for, let's say for irrigation at your houses. There's public perception issues there. There's all kind of other hurdles to go over that people have done. Henderson, for one, has one of the largest system of reclaimed water systems in the area. But it is a public perception. Fire department won't use it for anything. People will not, the water that goes out that is used out at the Lake Las Vegas, people will not go do rescues in that water. There's other issues that you have to overcome. So just don't think it's if it's being used by the quarry, great. Now we're getting money off of it. We probably don't pump it. Well, who pays for the pumping of that water over there? They do. So that's not our issue. So fine. But just remind you that it's a great thing, but it does have a cost with it.
Thank you. Always good to keep in mind there's no such thing as a free lunch. Anyone else? All right, we will move to item number 7, discussion of goals for the Utility Advisory Committee. Within our packet, Madam City Clerk had included the original resolution on page 103. And just very quickly, the purpose of the committee: act as an official advisory body on utility capital improvement program planning and utility rates, annual review the 5-year utility capital improvement plan, review the revenue requirements of the utility and recommend to the city council city manager rate adjustments, review utility resource plans, and lastly, review utility conservation plans and programs. I believe we've hit all of those topics. The council did have a meeting with the Utility Advisory Committee some time ago, a few months ago, where we also provided direction. Any questions, comments regarding the goals, where we're at, where we're headed? Chair Carr?
One thing, when you're asking about the data also, I should have brought up the revenue requirement. So, because the revenue requirement, it's part of the rate, it's part of its own aspect, but you need a lot of data to understand that. So the more data you have for actuals and stuff like that, then you can understand the revenue requirement, and then we can bring information back to you guys better, back to the council.
Anyone else? I know one of the suggestions at the last meeting was to have the committee form work groups where 2-3 members can get together, discuss an issue, and then bring it forward to the full committee. That would allow for those groups to meet more often without trying to avoid any requirements of the open meeting law. I think it would make the committee more efficient. A small group like that is not a quorum, cannot make any decisions, but I think that would be a way to perhaps help the committee move forward with some of the work that they have. Again, I don't know if that's being done. I know some of you do get together. Any thoughts on that particular suggestion? Is it working, not working, don't want to do it?
I'll start. It's working. We haven't done any official subcommittees, and we actually haven't been able to get it on the agenda or been able to get the meetings where we can actually do action to say we want a subcommittee. So we really, it's not, and I'm not saying it's just timing. So it's just a matter of, we've been trying to get things going on, and we haven't had time to figure out what exactly we need. So we have two small groups right now that are looking in, one's looking at the finance, one's looking at the the capital programs. And we're trying to work with that and trying to get more, but we still need, and that's still a lot of data. We need data to understand things, and so to work with it. So it's working, and so that's, I think the question is whether we just do it as sort of unofficial, well, if that's the correct way to say it, unofficial groups or actual subcommittees. So right now, we're just sort of saying we've got a few, 2 or 3 people working on issues and trying to go forward.
Well, and again, and Mr. O may be able to help us with this, but, you know, this is again not an effort to circumvent any of the requirements of the open meeting law, but it is an effort to allow for some of the very technical discussions to occur where there's no intent to come to a decision of the committee. And if we start down a path of subcommittees versus just informal working groups, Mr. O, that my understanding is that gets to be a problem if there are subcommittees that are named.
Yeah, with the issue of subcommittees, I guess it would also depend. I'm looking at the HMC, of the Boulder City Code of Ordinances, and there's certain definitions in there. And it appears that this Utility Advisory Committee, even though it has the word committee in there, is more likely a board. That's an advisory board that's been created through a resolution by the City Council. And so there's nothing in the ordinance that I can see that that says that they would have to have bylaws, and I'm not sure if they have any bylaws that would authorize them and indicate that they could create a subcommittee. The question I would have to figure out, looking at the ordinance, is if there's any subcommittee, if it's going to be made up of the existing members, or if it's going to be appointed by the mayor and council to have additional people serve on this subcommittee that would ultimately report. But it sounds like you want the existing members of the committee to be able to work less than a quorum to get certain business done. The only caution I have with that is that if the 3 or less than a quorum meet together to discuss business, and they communicate that with another member, then we run the risk of having a walking quorum, and that's where you see a lot of the problems. So there's nothing in the open meeting law that prohibits members from gathering to discuss business, but there's always that risk that there's going to be a walking quorum. Once one of those members speak to another member about business they discussed, and someone reports that violation, I think that's where the highest risk is. While that is a good idea, I think the safer route, especially when we're dealing with issues such as rates and things that are of major public concern, it is likely safer to have these items as part of their individual meetings in an open meeting, a public meeting.
I absolutely agree with that, and as I say, there's no intention here to circumvent that, but these folks go through a lot of technical information, and their committee meetings often run multiple hours long, trying to have everybody sort that out. So, you know, we may need to speak with Mr. O further on this, or the committee may say, you know what, we're fine with the way things are functioning at our committee meetings. Any other members of the committee have thoughts?
I kind of like the idea of being able to get just 3 of us together from time to time to talk about more of the technical type of things, not necessarily things that I think are going to have financial or economic impact on other people. You know, it's just nice to be able to somehow put some of these things in context to the where you can actually maybe set a timeline that makes more sense from a working standpoint as far as the city's concerned.
Well, again, that's my belief that, you know, the open meeting law is intended to stop for deliberations and decisions from occurring outside the public view. But Mr. O's advice is well taken that if you're going to get 2 or 3 members of the committee together, be very, very conscious of not involving 1 or more other members of the committee The open meeting law there is there for very good reason, and we certainly don't want to be doing that. But if two folks want to get together and talk about a water project so that they can present something or request a future agenda item that summarizes some of the technical information there, that might be a time saver, but whatever is going to be done, best to speak with Mr. O or when Ms. Walker returns and make sure that no one is violating that open meeting law. Any other questions or comments regarding any of the goals of the Utility Advisory Committee? Councilmember Adams?
This isn't necessarily a goal of the advisory committee, but I will just say that I do find these workshops where we have the utility advisory committee and the council in one room to have these conversations to be very, very beneficial. You know, when I watch some of these meetings, you know, I'm not going to lie and say that I'm understanding every single bit of detail that's being discussed, but having these little workshops certainly helps me to grasp that a whole lot better. And so I do just find having these working groups to be very beneficial.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, we will move to item number 8 then, discussion of future agenda items. Anything that was missed today that may need to be discussed, you know, has been mentioned. We already have scheduled a capital improvement project meeting for the city council, so any thoughts on items that might be included at that meeting or recommendations for it?
Do we have another report to publish before that meeting?
I didn't know if you were making it into if you're piecemealing it. That's not the proper way to say it. If you had a specific aspect to it or just overall agendas for the future.
Anything for the future, I think, not that specific meeting. I think Mr. Littrell has a plan of his that he wants to present to council at that time.
Because what I was thinking was, so what I was trying to get at earlier, so, and also to answer your question, Greg, is that, so Keegan will share this information with you, and then we will also get back together and review it. And then that's when we knew we would want another report, similar to what we did last time. Last year. But I think having, if you guys are up to, if it's reasonable, then I think a joint meeting like this would be more productive than for one of us to bring it to the city council. We can explain, so we could try to get something together for it. But it's, so that's why I was trying to get a timeline. We're looking at November or December. I think December would be something that would be reasonable. So to answer Greg's question, we would probably put a report together, and then I would like to bring it back as a workshop, personally.
Okay. Any other thoughts, suggestions? Okay, that then brings us to our last agenda item, our final public comment period. Public comment during this period of time may be on any issue. Again, there is a limit of 5 minutes for each speaker. And we always ask people to be civil and concise. Is there anyone in council chambers that would like to speak? All right, we will open the phone line then. Anyone wishing to call in, the number 702-589-9629. Again, this is our final public comment period for the joint city council Utility Advisory Committee meeting workshop. Number is 702-589-9629. Anyone wishing to call in for the final public comment period? The phone number is 702-589-9629. Madam City Clerk, you do have a comment that was submitted prior to the meeting?
I do. It actually came in during the meeting. My name is George Ree. The situation in the Colorado River Basin last water year, October 2020 through September 2021, is pertinent to Boulder City Utilities. 7 million acre-feet of river flow was generated in the upper Colorado River Basin. 3.5 million acre-feet of that water was used by the upper basin states, Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, and New Mexico. Between Glen Canyon Dam and Hoover Dam, 0.5 million acre-feet was added. So the inflow from natural flows into Mead was 4 million acre-feet. The lower basin demand is 7.5 million acre-feet, plus 1.5 million acre-feet in Mexico and over 1 million acre-feet of evaporation that adds up to a demand of over 10 million acre-feet. The demand in lower basin exceeded supply by 6 million acre-feet this past water year. The result is that Lake Powell is projected to reach about 3,540 feet elevation by the end of this year. If Powell elevation drops to 3,490 feet, we hit zero power pool. Possible cavitation problems will arise at that point. Boulder City is contractually bound to pay for the electricity from Glen Canyon, whether or not they deliver it, according to Mr. Dwyer and CRC members. The 50-year contract was signed in June 2019. It is critical that these issues be discussed in City Hall through some mechanism, but preferably by the UAC. We are in an emergency situation with respect to water supply. Marginalizing discussion of these issues only increases the emergency. Thank you, George Ree.
Thank you. Again, anyone wishing to call in, this is the final public comment period. The phone number 702-589-9629.
I want to clarify about the issue of the subcommittees. I just looked at the issue of what, as you were discussing, what the purpose was, and so from some of the comments. And a subcommittee, for the purpose what they're indicating, would be subject to the open meeting law. There's a Attorney General opinion that indicates that the breaking up of an advisory body into subgroups that would provide recommendations to the parent body, which would be the Utility Advisory Committee, would be subject to the open meeting law, so it would be a violation. So the recommendation would be, not only because of the walking quorum, but the Attorney General has indicated that that would be subject to the open meeting law.
Very well, thank you. Prepare for long meetings, folks. All right, and hearing no others for public comment, we will close the public comment period. Again, thank you all very much. I think this has helped all of us, and we are adjourned.